What is dark psychology? Dark psychology is the art and science of mind manipulation and control. While psychology is the study of human behavior and is fundamental to our thoughts, actions, and interactions, the term dark psychology is the phenomenon by which people use tactics of motivation, persuasion, manipulation, and coercion to get what they want. Dark psychology is the use of psychological principles of influence, manipulation, and coercion for purposes that may benefit the perpetrator but harm or limit the freedom and power of the recipient. We call anyone who deploys tools of influence and persuasion in a way that harms the recipient a dark psychologist. Since dark psychology is a manipulative tool, any dark psychologist is a manipulator, trickster, scoundrel, criminal, or abuser. Of course, the lines between a normal person and an obscure psychologist can sometimes get blurred. And it is also possible to manipulate others to get just revenge or for self-defense. However, let's not get lost in a sea of relativism and be realistic. Some people are darker than others and manipulate much more than others. And the opposite is true. Some people have stronger values and ethics and can be more confidently expected to be honest and fair. Dark psychology does not allow anyone to surreptitiously control people's minds at will and against the will of the targets. This section will dispel some dark myths in psychology. 1. Dark psychology is not hypnosis to force anyone to do anything. Hypnosis is powerful. A series of well-placed commands embedded in a distracting salad of nonsense words can be wild enough to give you some control over them. Once they disengage from your critical thinking, you can quickly escalate your compliance until you can successfully ask them to hand over their wallets, for example. Dark psychology is not NLP and covert seduction triggers. Once again, there is some truth here. Well-designed stimuli, including auditory patterns, can change people's moods and induce trance states that can help seduction and heighten their feelings. I did it once, and I talk about it here on How to Prepare, His Room for Seduction. However, NLP, or secret word combinations, have been exaggerated by unscrupulous snake oil sellers. Have you ever seen those "send her these 3 texts and she'll be all over you" ads? Total BS. In truth, she has to like and trust you before you can induce any change or trance state. And to change her mind with words, you also need to have some value in her eyes. Otherwise, the more you talk and chase, the less he likes you. It is generally better to work on more basic things than to concentrate on the exact words. Dark psychology does not make anyone a follower of a cult sect. Again, some truth. Cults and sects are real. And cult leaders implement sound psychological principles to trap people. Plus, they are often very good with power dynamics. However, it is a myth that anyone can be recruited into a cult and become a blind follower. Remember this general truth about manipulation. Manipulators' greatest skill is always choosing the targets that are easiest to manipulate. That does not mean you should have too much confidence in yourself. After all, the best way to put yourself in danger is to believe that you are impregnable. But it does not mean that the power of dark psychology in cults is also limited by the target's power, including their knowledge of power dynamics and manipulation principles. When you read about cult leaders whose members did this or that crazy and dangerous act, including self-harm, never forget this. Most of those people were not the most mentally strong and fiercely independent to begin with. And if you are reading here and enjoying the content of the power moves, the chances of you ending up in a cult are very low. Brainwashing. Brainwashing requires total control over someone. It does not work on everyone. It may only work on a minority of people. It takes a long time. Its effects tend to dissipate over time. World control by a small subset of people. The idea that the government, the CIA, the Jews, or any specific small group of people can control what everyone thinks and does through the power of propaganda is a failure to appreciate the complexity of our world. Yes, propaganda is powerful, but thankfully, the world is much messier and more complex to manipulate in a fantasy war room. Hannibal Lecter predator types. That's just a BS Hollywood movie. Psychopathy. Psychopathy is a mental disorder, and while some psychopaths are good users of dark psychology, many are not. Seers, psychics, spells, curses, potions, fortune tellers. This is not psychology, darkness, or light. That's just, well, mostly BS. Subliminal manipulation. Subliminal advertising works, but has been greatly exaggerated by some fabricated false reports. Lindstrom, 2008. It only works when the existing associations are already present in our brains, and you can probably hardly change deeply held beliefs with subliminal messages. Creepy images. Clowns, dolls without eyes, Halloween costumes. They are not dark psychology. They are just creepy works of art. Dark psychology in social settings consists of strategies and techniques to manipulate people into doing what is good for the dark psychologist, but detrimental to the victim. The difference between persuasion and manipulation is that persuasion does not necessarily harm the target of persuasion, or at least the persuader does not intend to harm the target of his persuasion willfully. Instead, manipulation implies a loss for the victim of the manipulation. That loss may be financial, material, emotional, or loss of your power or personal freedom. Soon, persuasion does not harm people, while manipulation does. Sometimes that line can depend on interpretation and framing, and persuasion and manipulation can also overlap. But the line between persuasion and manipulation is not infinitely elastic, and it is often quite easy to tell the difference between persuasion and manipulation. For example, it would be much more difficult for a tobacco company to present itself as helping people enjoy life. And it's nearly impossible for an abusive man to convincingly argue that his relationship control manipulations are to help his partner stay with the high-quality man he is. Both persuasion and manipulation are highly relevant to power dynamics, which is why on this website we talk about manipulation techniques and games that people play. Games are defined patterns or instances of interpersonal manipulation. We talk a lot about persuasion, negotiation strategies, power dynamics, and manipulation. Some examples of manipulation techniques that dark psychologists might use. Manipulative negotiation techniques. How manipulation is used to gain an advantage in negotiations. Guilt trip power move. When you have no real power, use this pity game to make people feel bad and do whatever you want out of guilt. Social reseller. Inflate what you've done for others to earn more than your share of social trading credits. It exploits the principle of reciprocity to take back more than you have given. Feminist manipulation. Telling other women to be strong and independent, so dating is harder for the target, but easier for the manipulator. Remember that many people will use these techniques without knowing their names. They just have a natural feel for the handling. Dating between men and women has common goals and some divergent interests. For example, men benefit from having sex as soon as possible. Women lose. Men win with sex without commitment. Women lose. Women win with a lot of investment before sex. Men lose. Women win when the man in their lives adore them. Men lose. Of course, there are exceptions and many ways to smooth out the divergences, with collaborative frameworks, for example. But the above statements are often true to make dating a fertile ground for manipulators and shadowy psychologists. The dark psychologist comes out with total disregard for his partner's well-being, while seeking to maximize his interest exclusively. The dark male psychologist. He cajoles her without a relationship. He lies about his future goals and plans. He pretends he wants to settle down, but only later. Seeks extra sex. He commits but does not keep his word. Very common. Chameleon manipulation. Presents a mask of the man she wants instead of the man he is. The game is to pretend that there is no conflict of interest and that they want the same thing, which in turn helps lower their defenses and have sex faster. Among female manipulations, position yourself as the prize. Reject it, feign little interest, make it chase. All of this serves to keep it on its toes and make it invest. Control it through sex. Most men need more sex than women, and some women use sex, dispensed as a reward or withheld as a punishment, to get what they want. P.S. One of the most popular articles on this website is How to Drive Him Crazy, and one of the most searched keywords is How to Mentally Fuck a Guy. That should tell much about women looking to use sex to keep men close. Be especially wary of the less common but much more dangerous dark psychology in seduction. Dark psychology in seduction seeks bonds and attachments based not on mature love and affection, but on traumatic bonds that leverage or create psychological wounds. Some examples include regression seduction, seduction through the roles of mother and father. Judge seductions. The individual frames himself as superior and makes the partner seek his approval. See the role of the judge. Traumatic bonding. The individual bonds to their partner through physical or emotional abuse. Emotional roller coaster bonding. The individual makes their partner become attached through cycles of fighting and repacification. See also anxious avoidant attachment. Control through personal kinks. The dark psychologist can provide sexual satisfaction through kinks that the target keeps secret. The dark psychologist becomes the only person who can satisfy them sexually. Plus, they acquire an important secret that the target wishes to keep secret, giving them influence. Love bombing. The individual seeks to make the partner feel special and unique through an endless shower of attention and admiration. Psychopaths often use this method. Some of the above techniques are sometimes implemented subconsciously. They sometimes are even the natural consequence of an individual's psychological makeup, as is the case with anxious avoidant attachment. But other times, they are premeditated. Love bombing, for example, tends to be more premeditated. Dark psychology in relationships applies psychological principles to gain power and control the partner. There is less conflict in relationships than in dating, but there is still some conflict. For example, each couple can gain by maintaining a nominally committed relationship with all the sexual and emotional benefits that come with it. At the same time, seeking more sex on the sidelines is why cheating exists. It can pay off. Dark psychology in politics consists of propaganda and political debate techniques designed to negatively frame the opponent, influence voters, and induce citizens to abandon individualistic behavior in favor of the collective. There are many levels of dark political psychology, and we can separate them into two main groups: during campaigns and in office. In democracies, these two phases may overlap as the politicians in power are still campaigning for the upcoming elections. But even in democracies, a marked shift from campaign to the office can still be noted. Here's a quick difference. During campaigns, frame the opponent as ineffective and unworthy. Frame the current state as hopeless. Frame yourself as the man to fix the situation. In extreme situations, make up an enemy and paint as the right person to destroy that enemy. See burning stake power move. Once in power, frame the status quo as positive. Take personal credit for things that go well. Find scapegoats for things that go wrong. See Trump with China. Promote ideals of nationalism to abandon rational selfishness in favor of the group, which ultimately benefits the politicians who lead those groups. The last stage is common in many groups. Government officials can be seen as group leaders, and in the case of extremist governments, despots act in the same way that cult leaders and hate group leaders act, using the same principles of dark psychology. That includes invent enemies, increase group cohesion through extremist values and religious fanatics, feed fears and frame oneself as the only one capable of dealing with danger effectively. See Trump with the immigrants. Feeding anger as a diversionary tactic. Dark psychology seeks to reduce followers' power and independence while increasing leaders' power and control. Have you read the Power Values? Do you move? One advises readers to develop before delving too deeply into any group. Why do I recommend it like this? Because most group leaders want to decrease the power and independence of members while increasing their power and influence over those same group members. To make people more dependent on the group leaders will implement various dark psychology tactics, including make people's problems seem bigger than they are, so that people believe that they will need the group and the group leader to solve them. Ridicule, discredit, or exclude dissenting voices. Cult leaders seek to eliminate all dissenting opinions. Since that is rarely possible, group leaders frame any dissenting voices as idiotic, uninformed, or manipulative. Funny, huh? So they can inoculate their effect and keep followers loyal to the group. Dictates and dogmas of the group. For example, manosphere groups say, "Don't listen to patriarchal society." That's what feminist groups say. Funny, huh? The same society, but two mirror opposite ways of framing it to keep the group loyal. Invent a great, enormous enemy that can only be fought in a group. See the feminists with the patriarchy or the red pill with the feminized society. When people perceive a great external enemy, they will want to seek refuge in the group. More dark psychology techniques in groups are promotion of the group's superiority over the individual. The humanistic and enlightened ideals of individualism and personal freedom threaten group leaders. Instead, they seek to prioritize the group over any individual. The more people sacrifice for the group, the more power they will have. Dissolve the ego of the members with the group. The more the members identify with the group, the more power the group and the group leader will have over its members. Merge the group with the leader. The last stage of dark psychology is that the leader embodies the group. That way, you can achieve full control over your members. At that point, there is no group anymore, just the leader and his followers who are in it for the leader. Dark psychology seeks to instill terror, mentally dominate or perturb the enemy in a way that lessens their fighting ability and, ideally, makes their fighting and resistance seem futile. Manipulative communication during war frames the enemy as vicious and brutal and spreads that view as widely as possible. Armed conflict is only one aspect of war. Psychology, information, and propaganda become crucial strategic tools to support a military campaign. What is the human behavior? Human behavior encompasses a series of acts put into practice by the human being. A number of outstanding factors influence him. Human behavior is one of the most outstanding aspects studied, investigated, and treated in various branches of psychology. This term refers to how people behave in certain situations, people, or events, but always taking into account the influence of social or environmental factors. The different types of psychology consider this term when developing solutions to the problems that human behavior can pose. In addition, studying this allows us to anticipate behaviors and to know in detail how human being acts before certain events. Behavior has also been the object of study regarding the evolution of the child to the stage of old age. Norms, education, and society are a fundamental part of its development. The most important factors are the following. Biological factors are those elements related to the genetic inheritance and biology of the human being that intervene in their behavior. Environmental factors. Although when we talk about human behavior, we think in the first instance of behavior between people, these factors must also be considered. The influence of the ambient environment, noise, temperature, or the environment also influences the behavior. Sociocultural factors. These types of factors are fundamental when we talk about human behavior. Beliefs. The type of society in which an individual, family, friends, and institutions find themselves are elements that greatly influence human behavior. Psychology aims to understand the reasons that lead an individual to behave differently from another. Research on human behavior is important for the following factors. Understand how human beings act in certain circumstances. Understand the functioning of the human mind in relation to behavior. Assess the social, cultural, and biological aspects that lead a person to perform certain acts. Determine the problems concerning human behavior and seek effective solutions to achieve greater well-being for it. Know the role of institutions and the social influence that exists in the human being to carry out certain behaviors. All this is very useful for anticipating, assessing, and understanding the types of human behavior. Human behavior is the way in which an individual proceeds before a situation or a person. For example, greeting a relative would be a friendly behavior, since both know each other and there is a cordial relationship. A child's behavior can vary between a familiar environment and another that is not so familiar. For example, in the family, you can adopt behaviors with greater trust between the members that make it up. And in school, you can have a greater emotional distance with respect to your teachers and classmates. In this case, we observe the influence of context and social factors. Another element that intervenes in behavior is the area in which an individual has developed. For example, someone who has lived during his childhood in a hostile environment and with patterns based on violence may develop this pattern in the future. Therefore, in human behavior, there are many aspects that are going to be elemental in its development. Human behavior is the set of acts exhibited by the human being and determined by culture, attitudes, emotions, personal values, cultural values, ethics, the exercise of authority, relationship, hypnosis, persuasion, coercion, and genetics. Since the beginning of its history, human behavior has been studied and understood to try to take advantage of its characteristics in the development of activities or improve it to allow it to live in a better way, either by observing its strengths or improving those aspects, and try to reduce the weaknesses by increasing the attention on the points in which the human being usually fails. Many consider human behavior something very complicated. However, it is not. Since its inception, the human being has shown an interest in learning what surrounds him and taking advantage of it for his benefit and comfort. Although the human being is curious, it is also creative, inventing a whole series of ways to communicate, from sign language, writing, even oral, among many other things that help to facilitate the life of human beings, as well as their survival. Another important aspect of the way being people is how they learn. Being this imitation, this resource has been widely used by human beings since ancient times. The obvious example of this is that one learns to speak or walk through copying or imitation. Some of the inventions are based on the imitation of nature, such as airplanes, birds' anatomy, or helicopter, which are very similar to dragonflies. The aspect of behavior to which people should pay attention is that imitation is present and has a lot of relevance, since imitation is encouraged from childhood as a way of learning. Hence, you learn to talk and walk among others. In this way, many practically adopt the personality of another person, for which people must be careful in their way of acting, since those who tend to copy what they see are the infants who always have in mind to be like their hero, that is, who they admire. In the first instance, the parents or guardians in charge of the infants are taken as a figure, which in their first steps they will have as an example during this stage. The human behavior of infants is mostly the reflection of what they observe and hear in their environments, such as their home, school, or the places they normally go, as well as the people they surround themselves with. Parents, siblings, family in general, teachers, classmates, etc. Physical and psychological changes will drastically affect human behavior when the infant begins to leave childhood to become pre-adolescent. Since the stage of change generates the entrance to a new way of thinking, very difficult situations are experienced. Different than in the first years of life. The person's behavior, as well as that of other organisms and even mechanisms, falls within the range of what is seen as common, unusual, acceptable, and outside acceptable limits. In sociology, behavior is considered empty of meaning, not directed at another subject, and therefore an essentially human action. Human behavior cannot be confused with social behavior, a more developed action directed at another subject. The acceptance of the behavior is relatively evaluated by the social norm and regulated by different means of social control. The behavior of people is studied by the academic disciplines of psychology, sociology, economics, anthropology, criminology, and their different branches. Relationship with its environment. The habitat of man, not adaptation, but transformation. The animal is linked to its environment. The environment where he finds satisfaction in his stimuli is enough for him. It is true that man also seeks the satisfaction of his instincts. At the same time, he takes charge of much more, knows many other realities, and is interested in them, even if they are useless or satisfy him. For the squirrel, the ant that climbs the same tree does not exist. For man, there are not only both, but also the distant mountains and the stars. something that is totally redundant from the biological point of view. The animal grasps and knows a part of the world, what it needs from the world, and that it is, for it, the whole world. Man is open to the whole world, or better, to the whole being. A very important factor in human behavior, society, and even daily life is psychology, the science of mental life, its phenomena, and its conditions. Phenomena are what we call feelings, desires, cognitions, reasoning, decisions, and the like. Considered superficially, their variety and complexity are such that they leave a chaotic impression on the observer. Without a healthy and stable mind, there can be no healthy and stable behavior. For this reason, mental health greatly influences human behavior. Social behavior can be defined as the set of behavior patterns that organize the relationship between the individuals that make up a group, its mode of action as a whole, concerning the environment in which it lives, with a purpose of character, adaptation, which makes it one of the essential keys of the evolutionary process, as it constantly is subjected to the variation of the selection criteria, and therefore to the direct selectors of change. Cultural practices usually have a great influence on different types of social behavior. This phenomenon of cultural practices originates when the repertoire of two or more individuals creates a lasting unit that can last beyond those individuals as time. The practices that are passed from generation to generation for decades, going through an evolutionary process at the cultural level, are the ones that have the most influence on our reality. This means that in these cultural practices, one person's behavior influences another person's behavior, which influences the other person as a chain of events. This creates the same cultural structure built by society's different behaviors. In turn, culture influences young people's socialization process through different institutions. Cultural practices usually involve entwining behavioral contingency, where one person's behavior can provide positive consequences for a second person's behavior. There are simple and complex societies, egalitarian social interaction, and hierarchical systems, subsistence, and consumer societies, etc. However, the social configuration of our species has undergone an evolution of such complexity that it has resulted in the appearance of various forms adapted according to historical and economic criteria intrinsic to the evolutionary process of the human race. The human being, against having a productive economy, begins to become sedentary and exert greater pressure, which has caused in a few millennia production increases, demographic growth, and the appearance of different social systems in which functionally different hierarchies are established that mark the beginning of inequalities. On the other hand, we have a cooperative and supportive society. In the cooperative appear certain traits of collaboration and altruism. These manifestations are minor elements of the overall behavior. Human behavior is supportive, that is, oriented not only to cooperation and obtaining an objective after which the act of collaboration ends in most of the aforementioned semi-cooperative societies, but also to the energy distribution obtained through it. In short, the transformation into a cooperative and supportive society, regardless of the members that form it, the establishment of sexual strategies between both sexes of an extensive and lifelong nature, the change in the endogenous relationships of the reproductive units, which, in addition to being reproductive, make subsistence and the use of a social division of labor are the distinctive features that identify human behavior. Factors affecting human behavior. The genetic. The attitude. In this degree, the person makes a favorable or unfavorable evaluation of the behavior. The social norm is the influence of social pressure that is perceived by the individual, normative belief, to perform or not perform certain behaviors. Control of perceived behavior. How the individual's beliefs make it easy or difficult to perform the behavior. Culture. Influence intertwined with the contingency of different behaviors. Human behavior is currently conceived as how men govern their lives and direct their actions and behaviors. It is also said that it is how people express and manifest their behavior in accordance with the norms and morality prevailing in society. Human behavior is an interaction and a result of two key factors. First, the conscious and unconscious motivations, expectations, and desires of the person's biopsychic structure throughout their complex biological and psychological evolution. Second, the demands and influences they receive from this geographical, economic, technological, social, and cultural environment. This behavior is generally uniform and permanent, but not immutable, since it is subject to adaptations and adjustments according to the circumstances it faces during its biological development and its development in the environment. In short, human behavior arises from the interaction of the individual's biopsychological components and the environment's influences. It is convenient to specify the concept of conduct and behavior because although they are generally considered synonymous, they are not when analyzed with greater conceptual rigor. Behavior becomes a specific response to an internal or external stimulus. In contrast, behavior is understood as a set of habitual behaviors that the individual adopts in response to environmental stimuli. Behavior is a response to a stimulus, and it is singular and specific. In contrast, behavior involves a set of generally uniform behaviors that the individual adopts in the face of different stimuli, plural and general. Behavior is the response to an internal or external motivation involving psychological, physiological, and motor components. The behavior of an individual considered in a given space and time is called behavior. Behavior is the way of being of the individual, and the set of actions he carries out to adapt to his environment encompass a set of behaviors. The biopsychosocial unit, the human being, is a species of animal within the set of living beings that inhabit the planet. But unlike all of them, it has an intelligence superior to all the others, which gives it superior faculties in terms of its brain functions. These faculties are his psychic or psychological functions. Additionally, it has a special characteristic, and it is gregarious. Gregariousness is a biological characteristic by which an animal species seeks others of the same species to coexist and survive. Therefore, man is a gregarious species, because he is born, lives, and dies in the company of beings of the same species. By establishing that man has a biological organism, that he has a conscience, psyche, and that he needs to coexist with others of the same species. The components of the biopsychosocial unit, the biological structure. It is the objective and material part. It is composed of all the biological systems of the human being, from the most solid and tangible to the lightest and most sensitive. These are the bone, muscular, digestive, circulatory, respiratory, excretory, reproductive, endocrine, and nervous, which allow the human being existence, balance, and biological health in the surrounding material reality. The psychological structure. It is the intangible and immaterial part. They are phenomena based on the biological systems, endocrine and nervous. Still, they have their structure and functioning, allowing the human being to act and respond to environmental changes. Likewise, they provide balance, emotional stability, and awareness of their being and their position in the environment that surrounds them, including the possibility of judging their actions. The social structure. It is also called environment or social environment. It is the habitat of man, since the human being, from birth to death, lives in society. The human being has a gregarious nature because he needs to be together with others of the same species to survive. His life is a permanent interaction with other individuals. Likewise, during his existence, the human being receives influences from the society in which he lives through cultural patterns, customs, religion, and social norms, laws, and the political system. Personality types and how to identify them. Personality is an aspect we all possess, differentiating us from other people and making us unique. Therefore, it is very important in an individual's personal development. For this reason and more, it is important to know what personality is and what personality types exist. In this sense, personality is the factor that describes people's behavior. It follows the traits and characteristics of each individual and their way of thinking. In the same way, personality is a factor that has been studied for many years and has been evolving significantly in recent years, thanks to new contributions and scientific investigations. In such a way that today, many more profound aspects of personality and how it works are known. Personality and personality types can be defined as a set of psychic dynamics that provide the characteristics of a person. It is a hypothetical construct derived from the observation of behavior. In other words, personality is the way a person acts or thinks. Personality is a pattern that encompasses a person's attitudes, thoughts, or feelings from day to day. In addition, it allows a person to function in social environments without inconvenience. Personality is known to be a functional pattern that is consistent with itself, which is usually consolidated and resistant to change. However, it works differently when facing various situations, since it is something internalized by the individual and does not depend so much on external factors. Remember that the elements of a person's personality are defined by various factors, not just by a particular situation. Therefore, this varies depending on lifestyle, motivations, and beliefs, which leads to a broad concept of personality and personality types. Personality and personality types are of the utmost importance in the lives of human beings, since they identify us and give us a character that characterizes us. Therefore, it is recommended to work on this aspect to improve the quality of life and be happy. In addition, it has been determined that by constantly working on personality, people manage to change their attitude, improving their image towards other people. However, personality also allows the individual to control emotions, behavior, and even psychological disorders are detected. When investigating the theory of personality and personality types, we realize that it is very dense and has a diverse classification. Therefore, below I will leave you a list of the 4 personality types defined by science. In the middle. This is the most repetitive personality in people, for which it could be said that they are all normal people. In general, individuals with this personality have traits of responsibility, kindness, moderation, mood swings, etc. Reserved. Here we find people who are not neurotic or open and have the emotional stability of a normal nature. In addition, they do not stand out for being so expressive or extroverted, but they are people with traits of responsibility and kindness. It should be noted that these people are usually insecure and do not express their emotions. Role models. These people exhibit high levels of agreeableness, conscientiousness, and extroversion. In general, they are evil people, which occurs more frequently in women. Egocentric. According to various studies, self-centered people are usually not as nice as other people. Usually these people focus only on themselves and close themselves to new experiences. In addition, they are unfriendly and have little frankness. Other types of personalities that exist. In addition to the personalities mentioned above, you must know that the personality types are very varied and subject to change. Among the personality types that exist, we can find counseling personality. These people are empathetic and often worry about the problems of others, as they have the ability to listen and understand. Therefore, they are good counselors and are very positive people. Altruistic personality. These people are characterized by being empathetic and seeking to help and do good for others, without expecting anything in return. Normally, these people help people out of trouble. An example of a charitable person is volunteering in humanitarian organizations. Reflective personality. Do you like to reflect? Surely you are a reflective personality. These people are characterized by spending a lot of time reflecting on the events in their lives. In general, they tend to look for those mistakes made and think about the best way to improve in the future. They are detailed, perfectionists, and thoughtful people. Outgoing personality. These people do not like solitude. Instead, they seek to be surrounded by people and socialize with them, spending much of their time with them. They are mostly cheerful and outgoing people. Pensive personality. These people are characterized as intelligent thinkers, since they usually spend time thinking about environmental concepts or problems. Therefore, these people develop a characteristic point of view about the world and their environment. Charismatic personality. These are charismatic people by nature and usually express themselves in front of the public, impacting and generating admiration for other people. However, just as there are many applicants, it could also be said that there are different personalities in which a person can be pigeonholed. Introvert thinking. He is the person who is more interested in ideas than in facts. That is, he focuses on his thoughts instead of what is happening outside. Although they are stubborn to defend their position, they are highly influenced because they give little relevance to the external, says psychologist Rafael Navarro. Sentimental introvert. Although she is very reserved, she is friendly and understanding with her close friends. Although they can be loving, they do not show their feelings. Sensation introvert. They are the ones who emphasize the subjective experience rather than the objective, since their sensory and internal impressions nourish them. It is a typical personality of musicians and artists, explains Susan C. Cloninger, professor and doctor of psychology at the University of Michigan. Intuitive introverted. They are people who are more focused on the future than on the present. They are characterized by being very dreamy. Extroverted thinking. Those with this personality are characterized by creating explanations of the world from what they see. They do not easily change their way of seeing things and try to impose their vision on others. In addition, they repress their emotions and feelings. making them neglect their friends and romantic relationships. Sentimental extroverted. They are people interested in human relationships, as well as being very empathic. They like to enjoy the company. Sensation extrovert. It is a personality that emphasizes the perceptions that tangible realities provoke, and that they like to interact with others. They are people who unconsciously attribute a magical value to objects. Intuition extroversion. It is characterized by undertaking all kinds of projects and staying in them until they are completed. When one ends, another begins. He likes to take risks, live new adventures, and transform himself. The morality of the intuitive is neither intellectual nor sentimental. It has morality, fidelity to its intuition, and voluntary submission to its force, little regard for the welfare of those around him. As we have pointed out, various personality types have been defined so far. We will now talk about the 16 Myers-Briggs indicator types based on Carl Jung's theories. This indicator uses 4 dichotomies with 2 extremes each to study personality. 1. Extroversion, E, or introversion, I. 2. Intuition, N, or sensation, S. 3. Thought, T, or feeling, F. 4. Judgment, J, or perception, P. 16 Myers-Briggs indicator personality types. This test is mainly used in organizational environments for selection or training processes. 1. ESTJ. Controlling people need to be aware of everything happening around them. They need things to work the way they think they should. People who like to control what happens around them always look for a way to make everything work, and if necessary, implement it themselves. 2. ESTP. People who belong to this category are active, cheerful, and spontaneous. They tend to exercise control over others through their ability to observe and charisma. 1. ESFJ. These people are very focused on caring for the needs of others, especially if they are part of their close circle, family and friends. That is why they lend their help whenever they can and ensure that their close social circles always remain stable and in good health. That is why they tend to avoid the appearance of strong conflicts and are diplomatic when there are clashes of interests. They go out of their way to attend to the needs of others, especially in the case of close people. 2. ESFP. Cheerful and spontaneous, they enjoy entertaining themselves and entertaining others. Fun is one of the most important pillars of their lives, and they are close. 3. ISTJ. A personality type is defined by its strong sense of morality and duty. They like to plan and implement systems of rules that allow teams and organizations to function with clear logic and order. They place a high value on norms and the need for reality to correspond to how things should be. Although they are introverted, they do not shy away from interacting with others. 1. ISTP. They are reserved and oriented towards action and practical solutions to day-to-day problems. They are also defined by their tendency toward logical thinking, spontaneity, and autonomy. They like to explore environments and discover ways to interact with them. 1. ISFJ. They are people defined mainly by their desire to protect and help others, and ultimately to be trusted by others. They strive to do everything that is expected of them. Still, they do not have great aspirations or are very ambitious. They tend to think it is bad to ask for compensation or raises in exchange for their sacrifices at work, since this should be a goal. 1. ISFP. People who live totally in the here and now constantly search for novelty and stimulating situations. They are reserved and happy, spontaneously, and warm with their friends. They have a special talent in the world of the arts. Individuals who live in the here and now. They are in constant search of novelty and stimulating situations. 2. ENTJ. This type is related to leadership and assertiveness. This is one of the 16 personality types closely related to leadership and assertiveness. People described in this category are communicative, quick thinking, analytical, and predisposed to lead teams and organizations. They adapt well to change and adapt their strategies whenever the environment changes. In addition, they almost always know how to explain their projects or stories in a way that interests others, making them very apt salespeople. 1. ENTP. People are especially moved by curiosity and by the challenges that, to be resolved, require facing intellectually stimulating questions. Their mental agility and their ability to detect logical inconsistencies make them people predisposed to be interested in science or philosophy. In addition, their tendency to be competitive makes them very active people during the day, always trying to come up with innovative solutions to complex problems. 2. ENFJ. People constantly learn about all areas of knowledge, or a good part of them, and help others learn, guiding them in their evolution. They like to offer guardianship and advice, and are very good at influencing the behaviors of others. They focus on their values and ideals, and do their best to improve the well-being of the greatest number of people through their ideas and actions. 1. ENFP. One of the 16 personality types is most prone to creative thinking, the arts, and social ability. They are cheerful, enjoy interacting with other people, act with their position in mind as part of a whole made up of humanity, and are not individualistic. They usually get involved in collective tasks to help others, thinking about the social impact of their actions. However, they are also easily distracted and often put off tasks that they consider boring or too simple and routine. 2. INTJ. A personality type oriented towards resolving specific problems based on analytical reasoning. Those described in this category are very focused on their ideas and theories about how the world works. They analyze their environment by focusing on their ideas about how it works. They know their abilities and trust their judgment, even if it goes against some superiors. It is very common for them to become experts in a very specific field of knowledge, since they like to have enough knowledge about something to be able to take into account all the factors that come into play in its operation, and from there, to know what can be done or what will happen in the future. 1. INTP. One of the 16 personality types is most defined by the propensity for reflection. These people like theories and the capacity to explain everything that can happen in a system. Their tendency towards perfectionism makes them correct others on multiple occasions. They value accuracy in theoretical terms more than pragmatism and solving specific problems. 2. INFJ. Less self-righteous than INFJs, INFPs also care greatly about helping others. From their position as private individuals, They show an aesthetic and artistic sensitivity that makes them creative. 1. INFP. They show an aesthetic and artistic sensitivity that makes them creative. They tend to help others. Less self-righteous than INFJs, INFPs also care a great deal about helping others from their position as private individuals. They show an aesthetic and artistic sensitivity that makes them creative. Understanding the personality of other people is extremely helpful in establishing effective relationships with others. The notion of personality type, as we discussed earlier, was introduced by the famous psychologist Carl G. Jung. According to Carl G. Jung, people can be characterized by two dimensions, each represented by two opposites: sensation versus intuition, and thought versus feeling. This produces 4 possible personality clusters, each with distinct personality characteristics, labeled ST, NT, SF, and NF. Sensation versus intuition and thought versus feeling. To determine whether the other person is a sensing S or an intuitive N type, you can look at certain basic personality traits to see which best describes the other person. For people with feeling personalities, you can notice if they are practical, it is based on the facts, the numbers; specific, present-oriented, concerned with the problem at hand. For people with intuitive personalities, you can notice if they are insightful and inspiring. It is based on ideas, theories, development trends. Future-oriented. For people with a thinking personality, you can notice if they are the rational principle. Reason dominates it. Objective, cold, and impersonal. Uses logical analysis and objective methodologies to solve problems and make decisions. For people with a feeling personality, you can notice if they are the emotional principle, feelings dominated. Shows compassion, warmth, concern, and support for others. Makes decisions and solves problems based on gut feeling, values, good, bad, like, dislike. An additional dichotomous dimension, extroversion, introversion, can be used to gain a broader understanding of personality. Extroversion is the tendency towards active actions as a dynamic response to events and information from the external world. Extroverted people get energy for their tasks from the outside world. The outside world is the fundamental driver of your actions and the main motivating factor. They generally have numerous contacts with others, even if their work does not require it. Introversion is the tendency to reflect on one's perceptions, thoughts, and feelings. Introverted people draw energy for their tasks primarily from their inner world. The inner world is a significant stimulus for your actions and a very important motivating factor. They are unlikely to have many contacts with others unless their job requires it. Since extroverts and introverts may have numerous contacts in the workplace, this cannot be used to conclude an extroverted bias. Differentiating characteristics are best seen outside of the workplace and in an informal setting. An extroverted person actively participates in conversations and activities. An introverted person tries to find a place of solitude to avoid active contact and concentrate on their thoughts and the things they like. Extroverted people get energy from outside, reacts to and initiates events in the external world. You have numerous contacts with others, even if your job does not require it. Prefer to communicate in a group. Doesn't bother you with interruptions. While introverts get energy from outside. reacts to and initiates events in the external world. You have numerous contacts with others, even if your job does not require it. Prefer to communicate in a group. Doesn't bother you with interruptions. Despite the multiple tools to assess personality, we must remember that we are not static. The result of a questionnaire does not indicate that we are in a unique and immovable way. If with 20 years we were shy, with 30 years we have been able to stop being it. Yesterday gave one result, today could give another. Many believe their way of being is and will be the same throughout their lives. However, reality shows that this is not the case. For this reason, when they undergo a psychological evaluation, they cling to the result, and one or another label is already hung. For this reason, it is important to point out that the result of evaluating personality is punctual and subject to change over time. Overthinking is one of the main ills of our generation, and it is the culprit that makes us feel frustrated and tired. When we overthink, we go over our thoughts without concluding. What's more, sometimes we end up with ideas contradicting each other. We go, for example, from being excited about a date to questioning ourselves for hours and reviewing every detail of the meeting because we did something wrong. We begin to blame ourselves for scenarios that are not necessarily true. Medically, overthinking raises stress levels, reduces creativity, clouds judgment, and prevents you from making decisions. However, the good news is that there is a lot you can do about it. Here are 7 steps to stop thinking. If you identify yourself as an overthinker and think of yourself as such, your brain will start overthinking because it thinks it's the right thing to do. Do not identify yourself as a person who overthinks and decides to identify as a decision maker. You will see that you brainwash yourself for good by yourself over time. In the act of mindfulness, make a point of noticing whenever you are overthinking. Name the action and decree you will not give in. Focus on the moment, or write about what you feel. According to studies, writing helps metacognitive thinking, that is, awareness of your thoughts. This way, you will be able to understand why you feel the way you do, and you will be able to take action. It's not worth stressing about something you have no power over. Every time you catch yourself overthinking, ask yourself, can you do something about this situation? For example, think about what expenses you can cut or what income you can generate, instead of getting overwhelmed by not having money to pay rent. Sometimes we overthink as a result of our irrational fears. Fear of being wrong, of what others think, of not being good enough, and we practically get into a very absurd drama because we suffer more in our minds than in reality. If you're scared, just step forward with your intentions and see what happens. You will see that it is not so serious. Also, the more you train yourself to act, the less you overthink. To stop overthinking, it's time to change your way of thinking. Instead of throwing yourself into suffering, let off steam. Return to the previous point of writing what overwhelms you. But just as you let go of your drama, think of solutions. Write the steps you could take. It also helps to get into the habit of mentioning possible solutions whenever you talk about your problems with someone. People often blame and curse the environment and what happens around them because they can't identify it as the cause of their discomfort and suffering. Because they identify it as the cause of their discomfort and suffering. But does the outside cause discomfort? Or are your interpretations of what is happening around you what conditions your emotions? Our thoughts influence our behaviors and our emotions. depending on the psychological current or the professional you read or visit, you will label them negative, catastrophic, limiting, destructive, or useless thoughts. What else gives the concept? What matters is their power to influence us, both positively and negatively. Many patients say they have a head like a washing machine, ideas, fears, terrifying speeches, and thoughts that do not stop spinning in my mind. They feel caught between worlds, unable to stop or ignore them. Some people hate relating to themselves because what their mind tells them causes tremendous anguish. There is two good news. The first, you are largely responsible for how you feel. It is not the environment that makes you anxious, but your interpretation of the environment. This holds you accountable and allows you to control and act on your feelings. Many would like to disassociate themselves from everything and continue blaming society for their discomfort and how bad everything is. But this option limits you and leaves you without resources. The second good news is that you can modify your cognitive style when you decide to train another way of thinking. Hundreds of thousands of people manage to prepare and finish a marathon, despite how hard this test is. But when we talk about modifying what is related to the psyche, we immediately associate it with difficulty, a lack of willpower, and our way of being, and we question the possibility of change. Follow these tips to put thinking at bay. Forget the idea of becoming a super positive and super optimistic person. The world is not pink, nor is it black and hostile place. It is about seeking the usefulness of what you think. Thoughts and emotions are useful when they allow us to solve what worries us, and useless when we can do nothing to relieve ourselves. Trust and delegate, and allow others to act autonomously in doing so. Excessive control generates anxiety. When delegating what you cannot take responsibility for, imagine a switch in your mind and flip it off whenever worry arises. To stop paying attention to the useless is not irresponsible. On the contrary, allow it to be in the present. How many times have you thought about the most empowering response you could have given in an argument that happened 5 years ago? Or how many times have you thought that a relationship will not prosper because your crush looks like that ex that abandoned you, and they are the same? Overthinking is very much related to living in the past. And while it cannot change, we can learn the lessons and make them work for us forever. Accept the past for what it was, and free yourself from that burden. However, it is also common that suddenly the thought attacks. What time was today's meeting? You check the calendar, and there is nothing. The invitation didn't come in the mail either. Could it be that they have not invited you? No, it can't be. The team always considers you to participate in the morning meetings. This line of thinking is common. Overthinking the basic activities we have in the day happens. Even more so when it comes to situations that emotionally afflict us or are going through a rough patch. Thoughts settle inside us, and suddenly it seems that we cannot let go of them. Although it is not the healthiest thing mentally, we give them 1,000 turns to find an answer that seems slightly acceptable to us. The problem begins when this type of mental wear manifests itself on a physical level or interferes with our relationships. Love breakups, difficult exams at school, strained relationships at work, any situation that represents an obstacle to our well-being is subject to these exhausting inner dynamics. The problem is that generally, when the duel is so close, the mental image is distorted. It is out of focus. When people are flooded with negative thoughts, they are much more likely to suffer from anxiety ravages. In the most extreme cases, you can fall into a deep depression or have bouts of panic attacks. The most delicate thing about the matter is that the scenarios we create are often fictitious and far from what is happening in the world. To avoid falling into these obsessive patterns, it is important to identify what situations, stimuli, or attitudes trigger them. Some people are reactive when their loved ones talk dirty to them, or the half-heated responses they receive from their partners. Sometimes all it takes is a message or post on social media to get the imagination flying over rough waters. Thinking is a powerful human quality and tool for our survival. When we think about an issue, we are trying to find a useful solution in most cases. It works mainly when it is, and it's about something we can have some control over. However, we know it becomes counterproductive when we go from thinking to overthinking. Going round and round about a topic ceases to be something that works when it comes to situations where we cannot do anything directly. Trying to solve something out of our control by overthinking will only lead us to fears, doubts, uncertainties, terrible anticipations, bad forecasts, blockages, and painful emotions. Overthinking a lot can cause multiple problems and trigger other types of situations related to these that we will address in this book. However, its consequences. It can increase stress. As your sense of clarity and ability to solve problems are affected, this can increase the feeling of stress and lead you to experience some mental health problems. It can trigger anxiety and depression. Blockages come from everywhere and occur at all points, and some are not malicious, but are still obstacles that stop professional or personal activities. It is enough to have the typical difficulties for others caused by one's self to appear. The good thing about challenges is that they serve to build a personal path. Achieving it is not easy, but it seems to be less burdensome for people with a clear mind. On the contrary, those who overthink everything make knots turn and stagnate, or it is very difficult for them to move forward. Overthinking, like everything, has its good and bad sides. It prevents making dumb decisions or making dumb mistakes, but it also often stops when you want to make any decision or action. The pressure that has been placed on you to make the right decisions is very great, so the urge to spend even more time thinking is very strong. It is believed that if you spend a lot of time thinking about a decision, you will eventually figure it out. Well, thoughtful decisions are good and necessary, but in measure and not in excess. At a certain point, too much of something becomes a problem, and overthinking is for many. Finding exactly when thinking becomes overthinking is complicated, but if you begin to doubt the decisions made more than twice, the ball of thread begins to roll. Overthinking is a habit that is not easily broken. So how do you begin to change the way you think? Practicing moving forward is powerful in mitigating the consequences of overthinking, such as anxiety and indecision. As we advance, do not allow thoughts to occupy your mind, fade, and remain in the past. You have to learn from mistakes. They are life lessons, but they no longer have a current purpose. If you stay awake to mistakes, you will only reap doubts and more doubts. All bad decisions are ghosts haunting future decisions. Personal weaknesses and failings should not govern actions. It's no use rethinking things because the past won't change anymore. You will only feel anxiety, wishing that everything had been different. The time invested in overthinking a past situation would be better used when a new opportunity presents itself, so that the correct decisions can finally be made on that new occasion. You can only think up to a certain point. Everything has limits. Decide something or take some action. Even if the expected results are not given, it is better than not doing something about it. Feelings of worry take hold, and fear, sadness, and hopelessness set in. Also, it can manifest with anger or irritability that eventually causes depression, and you will have a higher risk of experiencing an addiction. Affects the response of the immune system. Stressful situations cause hormones or substances like cortisol to be produced unnecessarily, harming your immune system. It can make you lose your creativity. When everything is calm in your brain and head, all cognitive and creative processes develop and happen more easily and naturally. It can increase your blood pressure and risk cardiovascular disease. The result of stress can increase your blood pressure and aggravate factors that increase the risk of heart disease, such as smoking, increased cholesterol levels, an unhealthy diet, etc. It will disturb your sleep. You will feel that your brain does not disconnect. This will alter your sleep pattern and its quality. It will be difficult for you to reconcile. Therefore, you will have a non-refreshing sleep. You can have changes at the digestive level. When you are stressed or thinking over and over again, digestive discomforts can appear that eventually cause irritable bowel syndrome, gastritis, or even ulcers in the digestive tract. It affects your memory. Overthinking unnecessarily puts your brain to work, affecting your cognitive ability and hampering your memory. Change your appetite. Stress can suppress or exaggerate your appetite through the secretion of certain hormones, affecting your usual food intake. It can paralyze you. To put it in some way, it can encourage non-action, since you will feel unable to make decisions, solve problems, and take action and undertake. However, many actions can be taken to improve overthinking. Be aware of these obsessive thoughts. You will know what you are facing. A good tip is to write these thoughts down, pause them, and come back to them the next morning when we are calmer, and you can counteract them with positive and logical thoughts. Establish a time limit to make a difficult decision. When you let the mind enter that labyrinth of obsessive thoughts, it is losing the battle against yourself. Setting a time limit to organize and focus our thoughts is a good technique to make the best decision and not get caught in the loop of rumination. Change your focus of attention. It may sound like the simplest habit, but it is the hardest to do. Overthinking is getting on a treadmill that does not stop, but the one who has the control to get off that treadmill is yourself. Focusing on your breath can help you reduce your activation and return to the present moment. You can use meditation videos and/or audios, or start by observing the movement of your breath and the body. See things from a broader perspective. It's all too easy to fall into the trap of overthinking and dissecting every stressful situation that comes our way. So when these obsessive thoughts kick in, try countering them with questions like, is this making me feel good? Is it bringing me joy? Will it be important in 4 years or 4 weeks? What consequences does overthinking bring me? These questions can quickly get you out of the state and help you let go of that situation. Focus your time and energy on the things that are important to you. Find something that brings you joy and satisfaction. Playing sports or activities that generate endorphins is a good strategy against excessive thinking. This hormone is responsible for reducing that feeling of discomfort and helps us focus on positive thoughts. Try the activities you like the most: running, walking, cycling, going out with friends, painting, etc. That is why below we will present you a guide that you can use to avoid these types of thoughts at all costs, and thus manage to dominate your mind, avoiding anxiety problems, overthinking, and even irrational fears that this type of behavior can cause. Motivation. Our brain is designed to focus on negativity rather than the positive, uncertainty rather than certainty. For some reason, news that carries some morbidity will be easier to arouse our curiosity, such as an accident, a disaster, etc., although later we repair and modify our thinking. Anxiety feeds easily on sensational, negative, and speculative news. So at this time, it becomes more pertinent to control that diet or bombardment of information. Therefore, we must make a personal filter of what we want to feed our minds. It is also important to identify how impressionable our mind is, to which thoughts we give more space, and those which are useful to us, which are overwhelming us, and then direct attention to things you have good control. It's been shown that when we shift our focus to what we can control, we see encouraging, significant, and lasting differences in our well-being and emotional health. Remembering that some overwhelming thoughts or worries cannot be avoided. Still, we can start by controlling the response to them. It's been shown that people who experience anxiety have a low tolerance for uncertainty. However, uncertainty is an inevitable and necessary part of our lives. And the more we manage and adapt to it, the sooner we can reduce mental distress. The ideal is, therefore, the acceptance that uncertainty and change are part of life. Meditation is one option to achieve this. Another option is thought challenge, a technique that uses cognitive behavioral therapy with good results and is based on some of the following questions. When worrying or catastrophic thoughts occur, pause and ask yourself, what is my mind telling me? Do not believe all your thoughts. Veil them and repeat, they are just thoughts, remembering that you are not your thoughts. They are part of you. However, many times it seems that we lack motivation to do things. Maintaining a structure and habits generates greater mental well-being. And for this, routines help increase our security and minimize feelings of overwhelming. For this, we must find motivation in the daily situations that we live in and do not usually look for, since this will relieve anxiety and distract us with other types of things that we are not normally used to doing, helping us overthink things. Schedule regular breaks after a certain time in front of the computer, after working at home or in the office. For this, it is necessary that you give yourself some time to enjoy your life fully and what you are doing without feeling the need to rush, which implies that you either take a bath or prepare a coffee as you like. But what matters is that you do it consciously of what you are doing and that it is directly for your benefit. Take a walk and appreciate how beautiful life is around you. Another way to motivate yourself is to write down and list weekly goals that benefit you. This will allow you to divide the responsibility into small activities throughout the week and prevent anxiety from recurring every day for things that you have not yet done or had not contemplated. You can also identify the most important and urgent tasks you have to perform and the secondary ones, ensuring that the first ones are a priority and the secondary ones take a back seat, avoiding stressing about it. Prepare the to-do list that you will have the next day as a way of planning, taking into account any unforeseen event so that situations do not arise that you did not plan and could cause fear or anxiety. You can also order your space at the end of the day, ensuring that everything is left as it was in its original position and an orderly manner before the night, and also when you finish occupying it, so that the next morning you do not have to waste time and generate that feeling of anxiety when seeing everything messy. Decide on a regular sleep schedule. Create a ritual to end the work activity. It can be to put on comfortable clothing, close the computer and any work device, or put on music. Be kind to yourself. You may not always follow through, and you may as well try again. Practice gratitude daily, both on a spiritual level and among people. Thoroughly enjoy small and big things. Enjoy the small, pleasant moments. Enjoy and be grateful for your bed, a good talk, a sincere message, and be thankful for everything. Begin with a daily deep breathing practice. Start by training your breathing and be patient because you will do better each day. Start by practicing abdominal breathing. Placing one hand on your chest and the other on your stomach, inhale gently and slowly counting 1, 2, 3, while noticing how to expand your stomach. Hold your breath again for a count of 1, 2, 3. Slowly exhale through your mouth for a slow count of 1, 2, 3. Do this for 5 to 10 minutes at least twice a day. Initiate or enhance social relationships. It is also possible that look for a volunteer community line by phone. Schedule live chat meetings with friends promoting positive topics, such as a book or movie to comment on. Have a list of friends and family that you call periodically, and try a short but pleasant talk. Send written letters. Exercise is also very important. Whether inside your home or outside, whether aerobic or non-aerobic exercise. The importance of exercise will be reflected in constant activation, reducing anxious thoughts, and improving your response to stress. It is important to find something that you enjoy when it comes to acquiring a habit of exercise. Nowadays, physical conditioning has acquired an importance not only in health, but also socially, and there are many tools to do it at home. Activities can be searched online, videos of practically any existing activity. Studies suggest that with 20 minutes 3 times a week, you begin to experience its benefits. Depending on the individual circumstances and health conditions of the moment, some physical activity options may be schedule a daily walk, complete a series of activities online, or invest in some training equipment, as long as you have already verified that it will be useful to you. The anxiety solution. We all feel anxiety and stress from time to time. Some situations often trigger anxiety, such as meeting tight deadlines, important social obligations, or driving in heavy traffic. This mild anxiety can help keep you alert and focused to deal with threatening or difficult situations. But people who experience extreme fear and lingering worry may be dealing with anxiety disorders. The frequency and intensity of this type of anxiety is often debilitating and interferes with daily activities. However, with proper and effective treatment, people with anxiety disorders can lead normal lives. There are several main types of anxiety disorders. Each has its characteristics. People with generalized anxiety disorders have recurring fears or worries, such as health or finances, and often have a constant feeling that something bad is about to happen. The cause of these intense feelings of anxiety can be difficult to identify. However, fears and worries are real and often prevent people from concentrating on their daily tasks. Panic disorder involves sudden, intense, and unprovoked feelings of terror and dread. Typically, people with this disorder become very fearful about when and how their next panic attack will strike, often limiting their activities. A related disorder includes phobias, or intense fears, about certain objects or situations. Specific phobias can include situations such as meeting certain animals or flying on an airplane, while social phobias include fear related to social settings or public places. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is characterized by persistent, uncontrollable, and unwanted thoughts or feelings, obsessions, and routines or rituals people do try to avoid or free themselves from these thoughts, compulsions. Examples of common compulsions include excessive hand washing or house cleaning for fear of germs, or checking something over and over again for errors. Some people with severe physical or emotional trauma, such as from a natural disaster, serious accident, or crime, can experience post-traumatic stress disorder. Thoughts, feelings, and behavior patterns are seriously affected by memories of these events, sometimes for months or even years after the traumatic experience. Symptoms such as extreme fear, shortness of breath, rapid heart rate, insomnia, nausea, tremors, and dizziness are common in these anxiety disorders. Although they can occur anytime, anxiety disorders often emerge in adolescence or early adulthood. There is some evidence that anxiety disorders run in families. Genes and early learning experiences in families make some people more likely than others to have these disorders. If left untreated, anxiety disorders can have serious consequences. For example, some people with recurring panic attacks strongly avoid putting themselves in situations they fear might trigger an attack. This avoidance behavior can create problems if it conflicts with job requirements, family obligations, or other basic activities of daily living. Many people with untreated anxiety disorders are prone to other psychological disorders, such as depression, and have an increased tendency to abuse alcohol and other drugs. Your relationships with family, friends, and coworkers can become strained, and your job performance may decline. Anxiety, that horrible feeling that comes on during and after a particularly hard day. It often appears for no reason and does not have a specific cause, as we have already observed. Normally, it is associated with work stress, or what psychologists call impacto de futuro, to the detriment of melancholy, which could be pacho of the past. This disease is so common that legal recognition of this pathology is already demanded to receive compensation for labor damages and prejudice. Cognitive behavioral therapy includes a wide variety of techniques. One of them is the so-called exposure therapy. It challenges the person to vividly imagine the typical fear situation preceding the anxiety attack. The objective is to gradually, and always with the help of a therapist, submit to the risk situations that produce anxiety in real life, to modify the irrational fear response. Another is learning cognitive techniques to change thought patterns leading to anxiety. This type of therapy is believed to be more effective than others. When a person is diagnosed with anxiety by a medical professional, the first treatment is the classic antidepressants. Some studies indicate they can reduce symptoms in 60 to 70% of cases. Because they are highly criticized and usually do not solve the problem, but put a chemical remedy in the short term, other types of drugs can be taken, such as beta blockers, aimed at treating heart problems and high blood pressure, and anticholinergics to reduce specific symptoms, such as hand tremors or sweating. Antidepressants can have adverse side effects, including nausea, sexual dysfunction, and hypertension. The alternative is often benzodiazepines, which can quickly relieve and control anxiety, but are extremely addictive when taken long-term. Caffeine is a psychostimulant, and there is a lot of research to suggest that it can exacerbate the symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, and trigger panic attacks. In the same way, it is not advisable to resort to alcohol and its sedative properties. This can create a vicious cycle where stress levels rise once the alcohol is processed and the initial effects wear off. However, other much more casual ways will allow you to beat anxiety episodes and reduce it. Anxiety is often triggered by daily stress and improvisation in the face of events. It is important to keep a schedule, plan appointments, and spend a few minutes each morning drawing up our action plan. The daily rhythm of life allows us to have just enough time to dedicate ourselves solely to obligations. However, it is important to return to ourselves, dedicate time to what we feel like doing, with or without company. It allows you to relax, disconnect, and restart. Relaxation techniques such as diaphragmatic breathing, mindfulness, yoga, or meditation can help us know how to better channel our thoughts. Once we calm down physically and mentally, we will know how to act better on a day-to-day basis, and that anxiety that we usually feel will not appear. When we allow ourselves to be influenced by fashion and sports activities, we can practice a sport that we will not always get the most out of. Sport should relax us, give us energy, motivate, and de-stress. If what we are doing does not achieve it or reaches higher mental activation, we must look for another. Within this, you can find yoga, massage therapies, or meditation, activities that can help keep anxiety at bay. Try them. Similarly, practicing relaxation techniques for 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day, can mitigate the bad effects of muscle tension, one of the possible sources of anxiety. It is also possible that you seek help in combating your thoughts. Fortunately, we can change these thoughts, and the first step is identifying them. Negative thoughts usually come in the form of, what if, all or nothing thinking, or excessive catastrophizing, such as, what if I don't pass this test? Or, what if the plane crashes? What if I make a fool of myself? It is important to ask yourself, is this concern realistic? Is it really likely to happen? If the worst possible outcome happens, what would be so bad? Can I do it? What could I do? If something bad happens, what could it mean for me? Is this true, or does it just seem that way to me? What could I do to prepare myself for what might happen? So, reframe or correct what you think would be more accurate, realistic, and adaptable. Conductance biofeedback can help you control your anxiety and work on eliminating obsessive or recurring thoughts. Avoid caffeine consumption, as anxiety management is as much about what you do as it is about what you don't do, and some substances exacerbate anxiety. Caffeine is one of those substances. This includes addictive substances, since while drugs and alcohol can help reduce anxiety in the short term, they often do the opposite in the long term. Even the short-term effect can be detrimental to anxiety. It is not the solution to your problems. Learn relaxation techniques. Currently, there are many ways to achieve the desired emotional and physical deactivation. We recommend biofeedback for its objectivity and speed. Still, you can combine this method and its initial phases based on physiological deactivation with the most effective stress and anxiety control techniques. That's what we offer at Nastia. Again, we insist on our goal: help you regain control. Acceptance of anxiety does not mean giving up on getting better and living a life of continual anxiety-affected moods. It simply means living with certain unpleasant emotional states that are unavoidable, but that we must make transitory. Choose what you eat and how you eat it, since certain foods can harm you, such as coffee, by activating you. But some foods can also make you bloated or uncomfortable, predisposing you to be more alert. To combat anxiety and prevent it, we must anchor our lives to the present, the skills we have or the things that bring us well-being. From there, together with small habits that should not be neglected, we will learn to be calm and have a lower average activation level. Applying emotional intelligence to your relationships. The capacity to recognize and control one's own emotions and those of one's partner goes a long way toward sustaining a loving connection with another person. Relationships come in all shapes and sizes, of course. Those closest to you and most frequently in your thoughts are the ones with whom you share the deepest bonds. Your spouse or significant other is the only person you trust the most. Intimate connections get the most out of your emotional investment because of how they are structured. Tight links of love can be found in healthy relationships, while anger and bitterness can be found in unhealthy ones. Evaluating the state of your close relationship. Those with a high level of dynamic intelligence report greater happiness in all types of relationships. Because of this, they tend to have more favorable interactions with others. The following are some positive relationship indicators. Both you and your significant other enjoy a healthy friendship. You participate in similar pursuits. You have the skills to settle a dispute amicably. You treat one another with the utmost deference. You are good at resolving disagreements. Each of you is willing to overlook the other's flaws. You are content with your current sexual activity level. You people love one another. You both feel similarly about how you handle your kids. You both feel comfortable with your financial practices. Meals are a social event that you look forward to sharing. The above items are just a sample of how your emotional intelligence might improve your relationship. Relationships between emotionally intelligent people are characterized by mutual trust and respect, and the ability to work through issues amicably. Grasping the significance of emotional intelligence in romantic partnerships. Empathy, social skills, and stress tolerance, all aspects of emotional intelligence, would be strongly linked to marital satisfaction when the team at Multi-Health Systems examined the data. Surprisingly, yet, the following were the most crucial ones. What brings us joy? Happiness was the most significant EI component connected to marital satisfaction, and relationship satisfaction is higher among the happy. You might argue either way about the cause of their happiness, their connection, or their happiness. In general, those who are positive in their outlook are better able to handle the pressures of daily life. The good feelings of happy people tend to rub off on others around them. Consider your sense of joy a toughness that sees you through the good and bad times. Optimists find the positive aspect in any cloud. As a result, their ability to keep a positive outlook helps them make it through the difficult times in their marriages, no matter how imperfect things may seem. After empathy, a healthy sense of self-worth is the second most crucial element of emotional intelligence for a happy marriage. People with a wholesome sense of self-worth are more likely to be resilient in the face of adversity than their less confident counterparts, and they are less easily rattled by criticism or insults, since they have a firm grasp of their strengths and flaws. Self-actualization. Self-improvers and those who strive for perfection are more likely to enjoy positive partnerships with others. To wrap things off, being grounded in reality was a major factor in a happy marriage. Having a healthy dose of realism in your relationship is essential. Those who imagine or hope for too much from their partner are the most likely to be let down. Thus, the research, which included polling hundreds of people, confirms what most common sense suggests. Emotional intelligence is crucial to fulfilling interpersonal connections. Evaluate the state of your connection and give it a rating. Understanding the true state of your relationship might be challenging at times. There is little doubt that finding out where your relationship stands by taking its temperature can help. First, you can get warnings of impending trouble and stop them in their tracks. This can help you apprehend your partner's perspective on your connection. Your partner may regard the relationship as smooth sailing, while you see nothing but turmoil. As such, this may shed light on why your requests for cooperation or change have been ignored. If your spouse is not interested in evaluating the state of your relationship just yet, you could want to start the conversation. If you and your spouse get off to a good start in your conversation, you might find it much simpler to talk about your feelings than if you merely bring up the issue unprepared, or even worse, let it fester. To begin, grab your notebook and do the following. Use a scale from 1 to 5 to describe how you feel about your relationship. This scale measures happiness from 1, very unhappy, to 5, extremely pleased. Second, list the things that make your partner special to you. Determine the most pressing issue in your partnership that needs to be addressed. Keep track of the facet of your partnership in your journal. The number from 1 to 5, how much you desire to improve your relationship to make it happier. How the scale translates is as follows. I have 0 drive. I feel a tad more inspired to work on my partnership, meaning I am somewhat committed to improving my romantic partnership. I am eager to improve my romantic partnership. I am willing to do whatever to improve my relationship. You can be successful if you score a 3 or higher on the happiness scale in step 1 above. You have the option of taking your relationship to the next level now. Keep reading this chapter. It could help your relationship flourish even more. Those who rank their relationship lower than 3 are dissatisfied and may consider seeking counseling. Think about reading this chapter if you are feeling down in the dumps. This chapter contains information and exercises that can improve the quality of your relationship. If things have gotten to the point that you cannot stand being with each other anymore, counseling may be the way to go to put the pieces back together. It is important to consider how much you want your relationship to evolve. Step 4 in the preceding steps. Whether you are satisfied with how things are or wish to shake things up, reading on can help deepen your connection and increase the joy you feel in your relationship. Again, see a therapist if you are hopeless about improving your relationship or have lost interest. Discuss your relationship from the perspective of the things you would like to see improved. Try to come to an understanding of how to improve the problems you both see. Recognizing the role emotions play in the partnership. When you give your connection an overall rating, you assign a value to the sum of its parts. You elaborate on the relationship after mentally weighing the pros and cons. Your connection includes your general emotions toward one another. Depending on your feelings, your spouse may receive positive or negative emotions from you. It is possible you felt great after yesterday night's supper together, terrible after the fight about the kids this morning, great after he complimented you this afternoon, and terrible about after leaving the kitchen a mess the night before. Your own high or low expectations may have a detrimental impact on the partnership. Maybe every morning when you wake, you hope today will be a fantastic day. When things do not go as planned, it's human nature to want to give up. A poor day can be even worse if you wake up with a sour attitude or low expectations. Disappointment will confirm your negative outlook. In addition, you could be in such a bad mood that you are blind to your partner's efforts to be polite to you. Below, we will discuss how feelings can both strengthen and weaken your bonds with others. Emotions are what hold people together. Consider your feelings to be the cement that holds your partnership together. The success of your relationship may depend on how well you and your spouse handle your feelings. Giving and receiving equally are essential in healthy partnerships and necessitate a serious disposition toward teamwork. The emotional connection in the relationship needs to be sturdy enough to weather these storms. Therefore, how can you use your feelings to strengthen your bond? For starters, if you are able to keep your emotions in check, you will be able to put more energy into working on your connection. Second, when you take care of your partner's feelings, they will be less preoccupied with their problems and more able to concentrate on the two of you and how to strengthen your relationship. The ability to control one's emotions is crucial for happy interpersonal interactions. Keeping your joy intact increases your quality of life and strengthens your resolve in adversity. If you are happy, that can be a barrier against less positive feelings that could otherwise get in the way. The two of you should view your connection as an investment. As more kindness is deposited, the greater the balance will become. Each additional negative comment or action leads to a decrease in goodwill between parties. If you are content, you will have many spare cash to put away for future safety. Your stockpile of goodwill also earns a healthy return on investment. Keeping your partner's emotions in check may take effort, but it is well worth it if you care about your relationship. Although there is no one-size-fits-all solution to strengthening your relationship, academics focusing on marriage have uncovered several important insights. Positive interactions between partners are an excellent barometer of the health of a relationship. Most relationship experts agreed that better communication between partners was key to happiness in marriage. At the time, hard data was deficient in connecting good communication with healthy relationships. According to an opposing theory, actions speak louder than words regarding the state of a relationship between a man and a woman. That is, acts of kindness shared between couples may be more significant than gushing words. Doing nice things for your partner regularly is like making deposits in a bank account. Over time, these good deeds will grow to enrich your relationship and establish a solid foundation of trust. The reasons why our feelings diverge. The tendency of one or both partners to take the other for granted is a perennial source of conflict in relationships. You no longer appear to feel the same passion and attraction that you did when you first started dating. Can you tell if your distance from each other is getting too great? Look at the following and see whether any of the points relate to your present relationship. You do not say hello to each other when one of you returns home. You no longer share details of your daily lives. How the other person is feeling on a deep emotional level is a question you rarely ask. It seems like you have cut back on the number of activities you used to enjoy together. You are not as desirable as you used to be. You look exhausted every time you get together. Whether you found yourself nodding in agreement with 2 or more items on the list above, it may be the moment to broach the subject with your significant other and find out if she shares your sentiments. Do not waver to let your spouse know that you are reading this book if you are at a loss concerning how to approach the subject. Just thought I would let you know I found a great chapter on relationships you might be interested in reading. Publish this section for others to read. Then you will be able to have an honest conversation about your respective perspectives on the connection. In addition, you can decide to work on strengthening your bond by making a pact to do so. For some, it takes a lot of effort to keep a relationship on a positive track. It is not always easy to put one's partner first and act in a way that shows they care. You, like everyone else, probably get so wrapped up in your own life that you forget to appreciate those closest to you. Some people have a more comfortable time than others establishing positive relationships. These people have developed high levels of emotional intelligence, as evidenced by optimism, self-confidence, and self-actualization. These social and emotional abilities are embedded in their character. People who do not put in the effort to develop these abilities may find that their relationships with others eventually grow stale. The day-to-day grind of dating can eventually dull the spark that existed between you and your significant other at the outset. The demands of a job, stress and parenting, juggling limited resources, running a home, and sustaining relationships can take a toll on certain people. The shine of romance can wear off for them eventually. Emotional intelligence and control in relationships. The key to a thriving relationship is learning how to read and respond to your partner's feelings. Many positive outcomes can result from learning how to control your partner's emotions. Improving your ability to read your partner's emotions can help you learn things like if your partner considers you attractive or annoying. Maintaining a constant and stable connection. If you and your partner can keep your emotions under control, you will have a much easier time maintaining a harmonious relationship. Compare your relationship to a car traveling on a sandy road dotted with potholes. Avoiding the bumps and moving the automobile smoothly and rapidly will get you to your destination quickly and without incident. If you can read your partner's feelings, even if it means learning to hold your tongue at times, you will have a much happier time together. Sometimes you and your partner will have different opinions on something, and you will have to decide whether it is more important to be right or to keep the peace in your relationship. Knowing how your companion is feeling. Acknowledging your partner's feelings is the first step toward effectively managing them. How effectively can you read your partner's emotions and respond appropriately? Some people's feelings are more obvious to read than others are. So what do you do if you do not know your partner's feelings? Some strategies to gauge your companion's mental state are outlined below. Pay attention to the timbre of your partner's voice. Check out the expression on your partner's face. It is important to read nonverbal cues. Inquire into your partner's emotions by asking her how she is doing. Use sympathetic language to show your spouse that you get how they feel. If you think you know how your spouse is feeling, you should ask her. Confirming your partner's emotions can help you avoid making hasty assumptions. Furthermore, by validating his emotions, You will show your spouse how much you care for him. Once you and your partner have established a common ground, you may move on to the next step of dealing with his feelings. Understanding how to initiate the process of calming your partner's emotions. The ability to accurately understand your partner's emotions is a prerequisite to effectively regulating their feelings. Understanding your partner's feelings is like examining a map before taking a trip. Locating yourself is crucial for figuring out where to go next. Your significant other's disposition is more likely to fall into one of the following states. Emotions: happy, sad, mad, worried, and calm. It would be best if you did what you could to sustain your partner's current happy emotional state, or at the very least, prevent it from deteriorating into something more negative. If you want to keep your partner happy, it is best to discuss pleasant things you can both agree on. Any potentially awkward discussions can be deflected in your direction. If you need to have a conversation regarding a serious or delicate matter, schedule it for a time and place when you can both be relaxed and focused. Both you and your significant other need to be aware of the problem and ready to have a reasonable conversation about it. Keep the following in mind while you deal with your partner's unpleasant emotions. If an argument arises or the subject becomes too heated, take a break and agree to continue the discussion later when you are both more level-headed. Rather than feeling defensive, focus on understanding your partner's worries. Try to put yourself in your partner's shoes and tell her how she is feeling. It is important to double-check with your significant other to make sure you fully grasp the circumstance and her emotions. Affirm to your partner that you value her worries. Find out how you can best support your partner, whether through listening, offering solace, either physically with a hug or emotionally, or coming up with solutions. Do not defend yourself when someone insults you. Listen and learn. Keep an open mind. Do not make things worse. Avoid conflict and hold your tongue if you have to. Before your partner is satisfied that you grasp the situation, it's best not to offer any remedies. Some of these tactics may make you feel like you are just putting off coming up with a solution to the situation. For women in particular, a sense of being heard or understood is crucial before they can begin to offer ideas. Men are more likely to look for pragmatic answers. Largely, men are likely to value techniques that produce immediate outcomes. Your aim should not be to avoid disagreements, but rather to resolve them peacefully and amicably. Choose a time and location that are mutually agreeable. Keep arguments out of the bedroom and the kitchen. You want to ensure that the areas you spend the most time in are beneficial to your well-being or neutral. Having to deal with controversial topics in these regions gives them a bad reputation that will be difficult to change. Trying to control your partner's emotions to the breaking point. You cannot keep your partner's feelings under control forever. However, there is much you can do to ensure your relationship continues to be rewarding. Whether it is politics, religion, your mother-in-law, or something else, we all have our pet peeves. One or more of these points may be a major contention between you and your significant other. When a couple is doing well, they could avoid discussing certain topics. They avoid bringing up potentially contentious issues in their relationships with their significant others. One can address serious subjects with fun if they have a good sense of humor and do not define themselves or others by how they feel about these matters. You should avoid exerting too much authority on your partner. Emotional management is like driving with potholes in the road. There are limits to how well you can steer your automobile due to factors like the size of the engine, the type and quality of the tires, the condition of the steering system and the shock absorbers, and so on. The feelings of some persons are more manageable than those of others. It will be easier to avoid your partner's emotional potholes if you are familiar with his temperament, triggers for emotional outbursts, what soothes him, and what diverts his attention. Strive to control your partner's feelings in ways that will result in a more fulfilling, mutually respected, trustworthy, and loving relationship. Do not waste your time trying to evolve into an individual completely different from who you are. The benefits to your relationship come primarily from your regular interactions. Improving your relationship through emotional intelligence. Better understanding your emotional strengths and weaknesses and putting out the effort to strengthen the most crucial areas through practice and increased proficiency can lead to more fulfilling personal relationships. You and your spouse can grow closer, face challenges with greater ease, and take greater pleasure from one another. Emotional intelligence can be honed in the workplace or the classroom. In addition, you can use what you learn at your job or education in your personal life. Your relationship can benefit from a variety of strategies that you can use by using your emotional skills. Learn to recognize your feelings and how they may get in the way. Cultivate the tools you need to take charge of your feelings. They range from the obvious, like knowing when to keep quiet, to the more nuanced, like empathizing with another person's perspective. Undoubtedly, a fundamental principle is to pick your battles wisely. To keep the peace in your relationship, it is important to know how to tell major problems apart from little irritations. Checking one's emotional state. Dealing with disagreement is one of the most challenging components of relationship management. When feelings for another person become intense, hurtful words and deeds are more likely to be spoken. When arguing with your partner, it is important to check in with yourself and see how you are feeling. Pause if you find yourself becoming angry. Do not start a shouting match with your significant other. Wait until you get to 10. Relax and take a big breath. You need to keep it from spiraling out of control. One way to accurately identify one's emotions is to pay closer attention to the physical manifestations of those emotions, such as changes in heart rate, skin sensation, breathing, and the rapid fire of one's thoughts. Recognizing emotions is the first step toward mastering them. If you can identify when you are starting to feel out of control or overwhelmed by your emotions, you will be able to take the necessary steps to regain control. To make a change, it is best to become aware of how you feel as soon as possible. In addition, you can learn to identify, experience, and expand pleasant emotions like joy, love, surprise, wonder, calmness, optimism, contentment, and more. Even though life may throw you some rough curveballs, you can strengthen your resilience by learning to identify and foster these good emotions. You'll have a much easier time drawing on those positive emotions in times of need, the more often you give yourself the chance to experience them. Recognizing which fights to fight. Every couple has fights, especially close ones. Disagreements can arise about seemingly insignificant matters, such as what to wear, where to eat, what movie to watch, what color looks best on whom, etc. Alternatively, they may have moved on from the major issues between them, such as, I despise your parents, you're too lenient with the kids, you're not interested in sex anymore, and you're spending too much money, you're irresponsible, and so on. Attempting to alter another person in any way is difficult, and attempting to alter an individual's many distinguishing characteristics drastically is no small feat. If you and your significant other are at odds about something, decide which issue you would like to discuss first. To zero in on the fight that most interests you, follow these steps. Select a realistic goal. Do not try to persuade him to go on a diet if he has already tried and failed, or to convince her to abandon views she has had since infancy. Select something substantial rather than meaningless. Choose an action your partner can alter. Select something that is not central to your identity. What you want your mate to do differently is enhance the frequency with which they exhibit a certain behavior. Define a target frequency at which you want this action taken. It is expected that you will adjust your habits in kind. You and your significant other must put aside some petty arguments. Take charge of just one area where you can make a difference. Schedule some time and a safe public venue to talk about it. Talk calmly about the positive changes in your partner's actions that you would like to see. The connection may benefit, so be ready to explain how. Consider how open your partner is to make changes. Offering an incentive to your partner is an effective way to boost their motivation. Find something that both of you will enjoy as a reward. Some instances are listed below. Doing things like massaging your partner's back, being intimate at predetermined times, taking them out to dinner at their favorite restaurant, etc. Some examples of romantic gestures include making a special meal for your significant other, taking them to a concert, opera, or sporting event, cleaning up a neglected area of the house, giving them a new piece of clothes or jewelry, and taking them on a romantic getaway. A week without complaining. Get creative, but make sure the incentive motivates the desired behavior or change. Be sure to follow through on the promised prize before making the offer. Be as detailed as you can in your agreement regarding the benefits exchange. Confidence in knowing when to keep quiet. You need to learn when to keep your mouth shut, to keep your relationships healthy. Do not feel the need to right every injustice or come out on top in every situation. On occasion, it is necessary to be quiet and listen, even if you disagree with the presented content. Once you have listened to what your partner says, you can reflect on it rationally. It is possible that some of it will be inaccurate, spiteful, offensive, unjust, or degrading, and she may have even provided a grain of truth in her criticism. Now, unwind. Refusing to engage in hostile behavior or being sucked into an argument is not an admission of guilt. People mistakenly believe that they are taking the blame for anything that happens if they do not respond at least as loudly. A person of virtue keeps their cool under pressure. Temper tantrums never end well. Persons who are easily angered are generally disregarded. Many people view them as childlike or immature. Most folks figure out how to avoid them. Increase the quality of your connection by exercising empathy. Being empathetic is like putting money in the bank of your marriage. In other words, you do not make debits because you are positive. You earn points in the relationship when you put forth a positive, compassionate, and mutually beneficial effort. Having empathy does not equate to capitulation or the recognition of error. Instead, empathizing is trying to see things from another person's perspective and giving credence to their emotions. Just because you can empathize with a situation does not mean you can find a solution to it. However, it alters your mood to make you more empathetic. By not resorting to yelling and shouting at each other, You may keep the conversation focused on resolving the issue, rather than further straining your relationship. Connecting with others in a healthy way. In addition to improving your intimate relationships, emotional intelligence also boosts your enjoyment of other friendships and romantic partnerships. You may practice emotional intelligence with friends or family, rather than with your significant other. The intensity of friendships typically pales in comparison to that of romantic partnerships. Being in the company of someone with high levels of emotional intelligence is highly prized. Consider the folks you count as your pals. How many are typically gloomy, dissatisfied, bad communicators, pessimistic, or apathetic? Not many individuals are interested in being around these types of people. Developing your capacity for empathy for use in interpersonal interactions. You may improve many relationships with the emotional skills you learn from this book. In friendship, for instance, both parties need to be empathetic. The quality of your friendships depends on many factors, including your social skills. To begin conversations with others, you need to hone your interpersonal abilities. Prepare your conversational themes in advance. Engage in thought-provoking dialogue. Attract their attention and get them involved. Have common ground in your pursuits. Have a good time and laugh together. Donate and receive guidance. Tell tales. Engage in cooperative activities like playing a sport or participating in a hobby. Be joyful about things. Do what you can to assist those in need, such as losing a loved one. Learn fascinating information. Get in some group exercise. Get involved in politics. Perform religious rites and rituals. Developing your social abilities can open doors for you. Having more friends, growing closer to the ones you already have, making new friends, and enjoying those friendships are possible. You will get more out of life and relationships if you tune into others emotionally and personally. Developing a healthy equilibrium of emotional and social abilities. One type of relationship is more emotional and intimate, while the other is more social and interpersonal. The stronger your feelings for someone, the closer you are to them. Meeting strangers increases the likelihood of engaging in conversation. Emotional intelligence is maintaining a healthy equilibrium in your personal and professional interactions. Two common mistakes are 1. Being too far from others, and 2. Allowing too many individuals into your inner circle. This can occur in relationships where the male partner has more traditional or macho values. It is interesting, but I have noticed that male engineers, math professors, doctors, anesthesiologists, geologists, actuaries, and coal miners seem more distant and traditional than males in other fields. This is also a feature of several cultural norms, especially those with pronounced gender gaps. People with Asperger's syndrome often exhibit extreme forms of emotional detachment or poor social skills. One of the hallmarks of this condition is an almost robotic lack of interest in other people. Sufferers may avoid eye contact, lack a sense of humor, or show little emotion in their interactions. You should avoid bare-all emotional disclosure with a new acquaintance, which could lead to you telling strangers everything that has ever happened to you. Interfering with someone's personal space to feel closer to them conveys contradictory signals. Many individuals will view this as a warning and will actively try to avoid you as a result. It takes skill to know how much information to share with whom. Many people find it easy to do so, and others must learn by observing how those around them act Observing the news can help you spot some of these indicators. The benefits and drawbacks of starting and maintaining relationships are shown on screen. The most likable people tend to know how to share just the right amount with the right people. For many, the rules of healthy relationships are learned through experience, and others appear to go through life repeatedly, starting and ending relationships. People with elevated emotive intellect are aware of and able to follow the norms that govern interactions with others. When it comes to emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills can be broken down into two categories. Theoretical, being familiar with the theory behind something and being accurate in your forecasts of how various human interactions will play out. Someone with theoretical knowledge of social connections can look at examples of behavior between two individuals and get a good notion of how the relationship is doing, and if it is likely to be a good or bad relationship, just by seeing the patterns. Real world. Confidence in putting yourself out to create and sustain positive bonds with others. Relational and interpersonal proficiency that can be put to use immediately. Some people may excel at conceptualizing relationships, but struggle applying that knowledge in real life, and some people may excel in both areas. These transferable abilities could help you succeed in the real world, even if you were not taught them in school. Applying emotional intelligence in your workplace. Individuals do not leave the emotional part of their brains at home or park it outside the office with their automobiles, as some managers mistakenly believe. Nor do people leave the emotional component of their brains at work. In this chapter, I discuss why it is essential for you to be not only aware of, but also be able to control your own emotions and those surrounding you at work. Not only can effective emotional management assist you in navigating through challenging circumstances, but it can also assist you in advancing your professional standing. Learning how to effectively use your feelings at work, such as recognizing when it is appropriate to feel happy, angry, sad, concerned, annoyed, and so on, might assist you in achieving more of what you want, or moving closer to your career goals. Having feelings at work. Do people immediately switch from thinking about their personal lives to thinking about their jobs the moment they enter the workplace? When they go into the office, can they immediately block off everything that has taken place in the preceding few hours in their minds? Not likely. Everyone brings their entire selves to work, and inside them are both the positive and negative experiences they have had up until that point in their lives. If you allow your feelings to get the better of you while you are at work, you will find that you are stressed out and emotionally disconnected. You become so stressed out and preoccupied with the tension that you lose track of why you feel the way you do. Therefore, when you are preoccupied with being grumpy first thing in the morning and paying little attention to the people around you, your coworkers or subordinates may wonder what is wrong with you. People in your immediate environment will wonder, "What's with her anyway?" Or, "I knew he didn't like me. I can never do things properly around him." You give people the idea that you are indifferent, distant, aloof, or introverted, along with a whole host of other characteristics that are detrimental to your professional advancement. Bringing your emotions to the forefront at your place of employment. Do not be under the impression that emotionally intelligent people do not experience feelings of frustration or anger while at work. They do. Emotional intelligence allows you to take control of your feelings, rather than allowing them to dictate your behavior and decisions in life. Being in tune with your emotions assists you in gaining a better understanding of where you are in life, regardless of whether you are experiencing happiness, anger, or frustration. The realization that you are angry and agitated allows you to take a step back and consider the following questions. Why am I feeling so down? What was it exactly that made you so upset? Why am I still upset? Is it possible that being sad will be beneficial to me in some way? Can feeling upset hinder me? Is there any way you could help me start to calm down? What kind of impression do I want to give to my other coworkers? When I am angry, is it possible for us to have a productive conversation? It is possible that starting your day off on the right foot will be easier if you take an instant to pause and think about the questions and their answers when you drink your first mug of coffee in the morning before you interact with any other people at work. In the following sections, you will find a more in-depth examination of how this kind of contemplation can be helpful, as well as some recommendations for restoring your composure. Taking command of your feelings and behaviors. When you become frustrated at work, take a moment to collect your thoughts and pull yourself out of the emotional abyss you may be falling into. Ask yourself whether the source of your annoyance is an unreasonable boss, a gossipy coworker, a rude customer, annoying emails, a missed promotion, or any other annoyance at work. When those negative emotions begin to come in the way of your job, it is important to keep in mind the questions that are given above and try the following exercises. What exactly caused your distress? Think about how insignificant the distressing occurrence is in the grand scheme. People tend to exaggerate the severity of minor or moderate issues, effectively creating mountains out of molehills. Worrying will not make a difference, regardless of the event's significance. Concentrate on how you can make things better, or at the very least, how you can prevent them from getting worse. To do. Try your hand at a little time travel. Imagine where you will be in 5 years from now. How much impact will this circumstance have on your life in the next 5 years? What specific aspect of the occurrence was upsetting to you? Consider the occurrence or the circumstance. What exactly bothered you about it? Would other people you know become unhappy if the same occurrence or situation occurred? Was it the actual occurrence or circumstance that caused you to feel this way? Or was it your interpretation of it? What would happen if you took the same incident and tried to give it a new interpretation? After considering several other perspectives on the occurrence or circumstance, pay attention to how you feel about it overall. To do. Consider the terrible occurrence that occurred. Begin by adjusting some of the following variables. If someone else had been involved, would it have bothered you to the same degree? Would the occurrence cause the same distress if it occurred at a different time? If you were surrounded by specific individuals or had specific resources available, do you think it would influence how you feel? What if you could talk to someone about anything? Why am I still upset? Suppose you have a habit of harboring resentment or unfavorable feelings toward other people. In that case, you may want to explore some techniques for overcoming negative feelings that last for an excessive amount of time. To do. Try to picture how awful it would feel, and you should strive to change the feeling to something more neutral in your mind. For instance, if you are angry, you could try reframing it as moderate frustration instead. Will my distress be useful to me in the end? Having an excessively negative mood rarely proves beneficial to anyone. Psychodynamic therapists, a term commonly used, catharsis in the past. They believe that expressing your negative emotions, such as rage, would help you become more balanced and whole. letting out an excessive rage might cause you to suffer mental and physical negative effects. If you can transform significant emotional turmoil into minor frustrations and annoyances, you will better cope with these overwhelming feelings. After all, how exactly is it that being highly unhappy will assist you in getting through a difficult situation? To do. Letting off steam could make you feel better in the short term, but it will not help you deal with your anger in the end. Imagine that someone is extremely angry with you. Are you more likely to be open to altering your behavior when you consider the irascible words and deeds she committed? Or do you feel more driven to defend yourself? Most folks grow more defensive. On the other hand, if you reframe how the event occurred, you might be able to control your anger more successfully. Take, for instance, the possibility that she insulted you because she had insecurities about herself. It is possible that coming to terms with the fact that her remarks had little to do with you or the way you behaved will help you reframe how you think about the issue. Can feeling upset hinder me? Showing strong anger can make a terrible situation even more difficult to deal with. Throwing a lamp at someone, punching your fist through a wall, or yelling at people is not going to make the situation any better, not to mention the physiological effects of being extremely irritated, such as an increase in blood pressure. Anyone subjected to your strong negative feelings will likely form opinions about you that are much less favorable than those he previously had. To do. Imagine yourself at the receiving end of someone's intense wrath. To what extent does he appear flattering? Do you wish to have a more intimate relationship with this individual? Is there any way you could help me start to calm down? You can free yourself from these unfavorable feelings. The quickest and easiest solution is to just call a timeout for yourself and remove yourself, emotionally and physically, from the predicament. You may benefit from some practice with this method. You want to be prepared with alternative thoughts you can bring up while going through challenging moments. Think of some images that are uplifting, or at the very least, unobjectionable, such as being on a beach or climbing a mountain. You could also utilize a musical interlude or a scene from your favorite movies. When you feel your feelings are improving, you must take a break and put yourself into one of these scenarios for a few minutes. After that, you will be able to tackle the issue at hand while experiencing a greater sense of composure. To do. When you feel like you are losing control, count backward from 10. Try starting at 10 and counting backward from there. When you reach number 3, you should have regained enough of your rationality to start thinking straight again. How do I want to present myself to the coworkers at my workplace? Do you find collaborating with someone in a bad mood enjoyable? What about someone who is usually moaning, irrational, or unpredictable? If you consistently act in this manner, there is no reason why anyone would want to be in your company. People gravitate toward those they find to be likable. People tend to find that spending time with upbeat, positive ones is more rewarding than the gloomy, pessimistic people. Additionally, people enjoy being in the company of others who are interested in them. It is more likely that other people will care about your well-being if you demonstrate concern for them and demonstrate that you care about theirs. In addition, you never know when you could require the assistance of other people. To complete, reflect on a boss or instructor from your school or place of employment that you looked up to tremendously. What about her behavior when she was under pressure impressed you so much? When I am upset, is it possible for us to have productive communication? When you are out of control, you are generally preoccupied with your concerns and issues to the extent that there is little room left for you to connect successfully with others. After getting yourself under control, Shift your attention to the other person and try understanding his point of view. It may be difficult for you to pull your thoughts away from the discomfort you are experiencing, but you should make an effort to do so and consider the other person before you answer. Examining the workplace circumstances that bring out the worst in you. People are frequently irritated because of things that take place to them when they are at work. The occurrence could be something insignificant, like someone leaving their coffee cup on your desk, or something more significant, like someone claiming credit for your work. In any case, you should be ready to deal with the various challenges that may arise. In most cases, the first thing that comes to mind when anything goes wrong is emotion. There is an occurrence, and after that, you may have feelings of nausea, distress, frustration, or even rage. First, you need to learn to master your emotions. Develop a distinct awareness of your feeling, regardless of how strong or mild they may be. Before effectively regulating an emotion, you must first be aware of that emotion. Tackling hassles. As soon as you become aware that you are irritated at work, you can start investigating the factors contributing to those feelings. Almost certainly, a somewhat insignificant aspect of your life is giving you pause. Studies conducted at the workplace have shown that throughout a longer period, you are more likely to be affected by the minor annoyances and frustrations you face than by a hugely positive event, such as an annual company party. Your attitude toward your work or the company will suffer if you experience many inconveniences throughout a day or week. Attending a corporate party probably will not change your feelings about your life's recurring difficulties. Some individuals can be oblivious to these problems, particularly if they have the ideal career or are engaged in the work they enjoy. For instance, if you have a passion for animals and work at a pet store, you might choose to overlook the inconvenience of cleaning up litter, dealing with agitated dogs barking, cleaning up dirty aquariums, and performing other mundane jobs. However, for most people who tend to enjoy their work but may not love it, problems can boost stress levels and present an unpleasant picture of the workplace. Very few occupations do not come with some level of inconvenience. Although everyone has a certain threshold beyond which they are ready to persevere, once that point is passed, employees start to lose their goodwill for their employers. What options do you have to deal with the hassles? Proceed in the following manner. Make a list of the major and minor annoyances you encounter while working. Analyze the specific ways in which each annoyance prevents or hinders you from completing your task. Come up with ideas for how to get rid of, or at least minimize, each of the difficulties. Make sure to write these down in your notepad. Think of a few potential solutions for each annoyance. Schedule a meeting with your boss to discuss the difficulties you have been having and the potential solutions you have come up with. You should let your manager know that you want to maximize your productivity during the workday so that you may obtain the greatest return on your investment at the end of the shift. The people who report to good managers are sensitive to their direct reports' difficulties. Those managers can eliminate obstacles efficiently so that their direct reports can focus on the essential work. Dealing with one's phobias. For some people, the environment in which they operate, rather, it is their anxieties, does not pose the challenge they encounter at work. You may have encountered this roadblock in the past. You are required to carry out an activity that causes you to feel worried or afraid, and those feelings begin to take control of your body and mind. As time goes on, the quality of your work will degrade, since all you can concentrate on are your concerns. Nevertheless, becoming aware of and exploring your feelings might assist you in regaining control of the situation and allowing you to go on with your life. investigating working conditions that bring out your best performance. There may be moments when you are more upbeat and happy at work, and other times when you are more irritated or displeased. Pay close attention to these sensations or states of mind. By recognizing them, you may begin to establish a pattern that will allow you to extend the period during which you feel positive emotions and decrease the number of occasions on which you feel unhappy. Keeping a feelings journal at work can help you stay on top of your emotions. Do you require more training in these skills if, for example, you have bad feelings when performing accounting jobs? Alternatively, you or your manager may have the impression that these responsibilities should be delegated to someone more equipped to handle them. Your unfavorable feelings about your job should serve as a warning flag to let you know that you might need to make some adjustments. You will be able to assess the nature of the shift after analyzing the scenario. It may be the case that you need to make only minimal adjustments. In other instances, you might require extensive surgery, which means making significant adjustments to your career. Think carefully about the things that you do well. Examine your practices to see if you are getting the most out of your advantages. There may be aspects of your job where you can put your abilities to use that you have not even considered yet. You may find that you excel in a field that requires strong interpersonal skills, such as public relations, sales, training, or other related fields. Suppose you find that your most productive periods at work are when you are using the computer. In that case, you may want to consider a career change into a more technically focused field, such as research, programming, database management, or several other similar fields. Do you get a kick from assisting other people with computer issues? The most reasonable next steps could be to provide training or technical support. Everyone will benefit from having increased control over the workflow, allowing him or her to do the same amount of work, or, as is frequently the case, even more work. If you are in the frame of mind that is most conducive to your work, you will experience a sense of mastery over your work, rather than feeling as though your work is mastering you. Your attitude toward the job, the workplace, and the organization will improve if you feel you have some degree of control over those aspects. You will have a greater incentive to perform to the best of your abilities if you know that your superiors and the top management are genuinely interested in assisting you in achieving your professional goals. Dealing with the feelings of others while at work. It is possible that you won't believe this, but many of the managers I talk to take great pride in proclaiming that their workplaces are not places for expressing emotions. On the other hand, progressive managers know that they are dealing with full people and not just cogs in an assembly line, each of which has a particular job. For many years, managers have attempted to exert their authority over their staff by providing them with directives. This method is frequently successful. On the other hand, it frequently results in feelings of resentment. Most people in today's society are curious as to why their supervisors give them tasks to complete. I do not mean drawn out and lengthy explanations. Rather, I mean justifications that are compelling on both an intellectual and emotional level. When a manager requests that employees like to be considered part of a team with a stake in the success of a project, she receives better outcomes from her employees. This is because employees like to feel they have a say in how the project turns out. When making requests, an emotionally aware manager takes the following considerations in mind. Do not offer orders. Please include any background information or justification for the request. Instead of acting like a boss, communicate with your employee as if you were fellow team members. Illustrate how the request will result in mutually beneficial outcomes. Allow the individual to have some say over whether or not they will accept the request and how they will carry it out. Ensure that the individual has a positive experience due to the interaction. Control and being influenced by people. Influence is one of the most necessary skills within organizations, especially if we deal with more experienced people. A person influences another when he can affect his life, whether in decision-making, habits, or thought maps. Therefore, it is a great responsibility assumed by those who become people who influence too much. Although the term is now biased toward communication, it is understood as something more complete, capable of intervening us and modifying our lives. To influence, we need to know who we are, self-awareness. Also, know the strengths, beliefs, lines of thought, emotional awareness, or relationships. Why? Because we have to be authentic to be able to invoke the authenticity of others. When we influence, we invoke the same thing we are showing. That is why it is important to be aware of who we are. Understanding our emotional dimension, feelings, or response patterns is also necessary, so that all this helps us achieve our goals. When an emotion appears, we must be able to determine the information it gives us and use it to move forward. The concept of emotional intelligence resonates with this new era's intellectual and cultural climate. Emphasizes the importance of developing competencies and capabilities for self-awareness, self-regulation, self-motivation, social awareness, and organizational awareness by all the members that make up an organization. In the world of work, emotional intelligence provides skills to develop talent development programs for any professional who wants to influence their organization, whether in the educational, health, social, or business sectors, among others. However, it is not about manipulating others to get what you want, but about influencing their decision without resorting to tricks. Asking someone for a favor is a great trick. This trick involves getting someone to do you a favor, since a person who has done someone a favor is likelier to do another favor again than if the favor was done. They have received from this person. If someone does another person a favor, their brain thinks it has to be because they like them, even if that's not true. Finally, to avoid the phenomenon of cognitive dissonance, that is, to maintain consistency between what one thinks and does, he likes this person. It is also known as the Benjamin Franklin effect. Legend has it that Benjamin Franklin once wanted to win over someone who did not care for him. To do this, he asked him to lend him a book, and when he lent it to him, he thanked him effusively. As a result of this fact, Franklin and this person, who previously did not even speak to him, became good friends. This phenomenon has been demonstrated through experiments. For example, it has been found that when the researcher asked someone for a favor, this person valued the researcher much better than if they did not ask for anything, the control group. Although it seems like something that goes against logic, the explanation is quite simple. If someone does you a favor, they subconsciously think you must be a good person, since you deserve favors. And if you are a good person, they like you. Aim high. This trick consists of asking for more than you expect to get, and then modifying your request to a less ambitious one. This technique is also known as the door-in-the-nose technique. You initially ask for something extremely difficult, something that is very likely not going to be granted, and then ask for something much more reasonable, which is what you expected to get. Although it sounds counterintuitive, it is easy for the other person to agree to the second request once they have denied the first. The logic behind this technique is that the person who denied your first request feels bad about doing so, even though what you asked for was unreasonable. To make up for this first misdeed, in which they have figuratively slammed the door on you, they feel compelled to agree to your second request, which is also much more reasonable. This technique has been found to work very well in practice as long as the same person makes the first and second requests. Suppose the person making the second request is someone other than the one who has been denied the first request. In that case, the person who has just refused the requested favor does not feel obligated to compensate a third person for this fact, and feels free to deny the second person a favor, even if the request is somewhat reasonable. Call a person by name. This technique consists of calling a person by name or title, depending on the situation. Using someone's name is very important. The name of a person is, for him, the sweetest sound he can hear. The name is in the depths of our identity. Hearing our name validates our existence and makes us feel important. People who make us feel this way in general, we like them. Using a professional title also has persuasive effects, it seems. This phenomenon is because you become that person if you behave like someone else. To influence others, you can talk to them as if they are what you want them to be, so they begin to feel that way themselves. For example, if you call someone you just met a friend, they feel closer to you. Flatter someone. Flattery can work wonders in convincing someone to do something. Although it seems obvious, you should remember that the compliment must seem sincere, because otherwise it can have the opposite effect to the one you are after. Specifically, studies have shown that if you compliment someone with a good self-concept, as long as the compliment is perceived as sincere, it will make them feel good, since you confirm their perception of themselves. This person will like you very much. On the other hand, people with a poor self-concept may not appreciate the compliment, as it contradicts what they think of themselves. They reject it, or take it as a mockery, making them dislike you. However, unless they suffer from depression, most people have a good concept of themselves. Imitate the other person. This technique consists of imitating the behavior of the person you want to persuade, known in English as mirroring. Imitating the gestures of people we like is something we do naturally, some more than others. Some people are chameleons and mimic others by copying their manners and way of speaking. It has been proven that imitating others makes them like you better. Studies show that if you imitate someone, this person is more likely to do what you ask. Be careful. It is not about making fun of someone by imitating their gestures in a cartoonish way, which is considered an offense. It is about adopting manners and a way of speaking that resembles that of the other person. It has also been proven that if you imitate someone, this person behaves better, not only with you, but in general with everyone. It seems that the person you imitate feels valued, making them more confident and happier. Happy people in general behave better with others. Take advantage when they are tired. This technique consists of asking for something when the other person is tired. When someone is tired, it is easier for them to give in to the pressure of others. This happens because tiredness is not only physical, but also mental. When you ask someone tired, they are likely to say something like, "I'll do it tomorrow," because they prefer not to make a decision right then. But since they have already committed themselves, it is easy for them to keep their word the next day, because people feel bad if they do the opposite of what they say. That is, to avoid what is known as cognitive dissonance. Make an offer they cannot refuse. This technique starts by making an offer the other person cannot refuse. This technique is the opposite of the door-in-the-face technique. Instead of making a very high offer, you start by making a very small one, known as the foot-in-the-door technique. Once they agree to do something small, it is easier to agree to do something bigger. It is a fact that has been scientifically proven. In an experiment, they started by asking people to show their support for the environment, which was easy for them to do. Once people agreed to show their support for the environment, they were more likely to buy products that showed support for the environment. But you should not make the second request immediately after. It has been proven that people agree more easily if you wait a day or two to do it. Keep your mouth shut. This technique consists of not correcting others when they are wrong. Correcting others when they are wrong is usually not effective, and the only thing you get is that they turn against you. The best way to correct someone without telling them that they are wrong is to listen to what they have to say and try to understand how they feel and why they feel that way. Then show that you partly agree with them and explain where you stand. Suppose you start by saying that you agree with them. In that case, it is easier for them to listen to what you will say next, allowing you to correct them without making them feel upset. It is a technique developed by Ray Ransberger and Marshall Fritz, known as Ransberger pivot. Repeat things. This technique consists of repeating what the other has just said. One of the best ways to influence others is to show that you know how they feel. That is, show empathy. One of the most effective ways to do this is to paraphrase what they have said. That is, to repeat in your own words what the other has just said, which is known as active listening. Some studies show that by using active listening, the other person shows their emotions more easily and improves the relationship between the two. This technique can be used in numerous contexts. Suppose you listen carefully to the other person and repeat what they have said in your own words. Paraphrases. In that case, they will feel more comfortable talking to you. This leads to mutual liking and the other paying more attention to what you say, if only to reward the fact that you pay attention to what she has said. Nod your head. This technique consists of nodding while the other speaks, especially if you ask him for a favor later. It has been proven that when people nod their heads while listening, they are more likely to agree with what the other is saying. It has also been proven that when they are in front of a person who nods their head when they speak, they tend to do the same. This is due to the natural tendency of human beings to imitate the gestures of those around us, especially those we like. So if you want to convince someone to do you a favor, nod frequently during the conversation. The person you are talking to will probably also nod when you speak. What they will do is agree with you more without realizing it, totally unconsciously. Amplification hypothesis. When we express a certain attitude with certainty, that attitude hardens, becoming more resistant to persuasion. On the other hand, if we express uncertainty, the attitude softens. On the other hand, the hypothesis establishes that a logical attitude will increase resistance when faced with an emotionally based argument. The same effect occurs in reverse. A logical argument has little impact on a more emotional person. If we want to influence other people, we must align our projected attitudes with theirs. If you are one of the non-aligned, you will only be able to create resistance. On the other hand, to defend ourselves against a persuader, we must change our attitudes so that when it is logical, we will be more emotional, and vice versa. Conversion theory. In groups, the minority can have a disproportionate effect, converting many majority members to their cause. Many majority group members are not strongly convinced of their cause. They have often become disillusioned with the group's purpose, process, or leader, and are looking for a viable alternative. 4 main factors give the minority their power. Consistency. Be consistent in expressing the opinion of the minority group. Confidence. Being sure of the accuracy of the ideas and opinions presented. Impartiality. Appear reasonable and impartial in the presentation of ideas. Resistance. Resist the natural social pressure and abuse that the majority can exert on members of the minority. How do I put it into practice? If you are part of a minority, you must find others who are like-minded and teach them to be consistent. Develop clear messages that position you as the voice of reason. If, on the other hand, you are facing a minority, you must mobilize quickly to make their methods visible and verbalize their message. Manipulation theory. To persuade a person, one of the 4 maxims of a conversation is deliberately broken. Quantity. The information provided will be complete, as expected by the listener, and without omissions. The information provided will be true and correct. Relation. The information will be relevant to the topic in question. Appearance. Things will be presented in a way that allows others to understand them and with the appropriate nonverbal language. How do I put it into practice? It is possible to persuade by omitting information, telling falsehoods, getting off topic, and confusing the other person. The most effective way to defend against this type of persuasion is to ask about what you hear, ask for details, look for evidence, and pay attention to body language. Priming theory. Priming involves the presentation of a stimulus that will influence future thoughts and actions in the short term, even though they may not seem connected. Priming generally has a limited effect, maintaining its effectiveness for around 24 hours. However, with adequate training, its effects can be much more persistent. It is a strategy widely used in advertising with a subliminal effect that consists of associating symbols or stimuli referring to the most explicit context in an almost invisible way. How do I put it into practice? Priming must be used subtly so that the person does not perceive that they are being influenced. We must be especially careful about making the strategy obvious, as it can cause a reverse reaction. On the other hand, when in a conversation you suddenly find yourself thinking about something you had not anticipated, try to discover what may have caused that thought. Reciprocity rule. This is a very common social norm, which states that if I give you something or help you in any way, you are obligated to return the favor. This norm is so powerful that it allows the initial giver to ask for something in return, usually more than is offered, without having to wait for an act of voluntary reciprocity. Reciprocity also works at the level of liking. We like people who like us, and vice versa. How do I put it into practice? Giving things to others is helpful if you give them something they appreciate. You must not offer too much, lest they feel oppressed by the obligation. Next, you must ask for something in return. The best strategy to defend yourself from this practice is to say thank you in response to any offer. If they ask for something in return, politely say no, or turn the tables by giving them something you don't want and asking for something in return. Scarcity principle. In our need to control our world, the choice is an important freedom. If something becomes scarce, we want it more. This desire is increased even more if we think that someone else could achieve it and therefore gain the social position we could have. This technique is widely used in sales with messages like, out of stock or only for today. How do I put it into practice? It is important to remember that what you choose will be desired by the other person if it is only available for a limited time or is considered a scarce commodity. It is common in business and romantic relationships. To defend yourself against this type of persuasion, when you look at a scarce good, you must ask yourself if you want it or if it is the mirage of scarcity. Sleeper or sleeper effect. Persuasive messages tend to decrease their effect over time, except for messages that come from sources of low credibility. Messages that begin with low persuasiveness gain in persuasiveness as our minds slowly dissociate the source of the message. For example, a car salesman, presumably shoddy, and his advice on which car is the best. How do I put it into practice? It is about giving greater importance to the message than the source from which it comes. Once the message has been received, the source can be safely and desirably forgotten. On the other hand, when we have to decide based on concrete evidence, we must deliberately remember the source and therefore the credibility of the data. Social influence. Social influence has to do with how the person perceives himself concerning the influence factor that links him to other people and society. The three areas of social influence are conformity, compliance, and obedience. Conformity changes how we behave as we seek belonging, approval, and friendship from others. Conformity can even change our beliefs and values in line with those of our admired peers and superiors. Compliance assumes that a person does something they are asked to do by another. The person can choose to comply or not comply. However, thoughts of social reward and punishment may lead to compliance when they do not want to comply. Obedience is different from compliance, as it involves obeying an order from someone who is accepted as an authority figure. In compliance, you still have some options, and in obedience, you think you have no choice.